Chapter 550. His eyes were locked on Dustless. Shilyu of the Rain was a bloodthirsty person. It was originally because of the arbitrary execution of prisoners that he was sublimated from the original guard to a prisoner. Clang! Without hesitation, he pulled out of the scabbard. The sharp blade was exposed in the dark space, the low temperature was even more indifferent, and the existence of ice residue could be faintly caught in the air flowing around. Whoosh! With the second-generation ghost blade all out of the scabbard, Shilyu of the Rain's temperament changed greatly. His body exuded a strange purple demon aura, extremely evil. The rich purple light was almost substantial, as if it was the source of evil. A little contamination will make you lose yourself. The only difference is that compared with the existence of the first-generation ghost blade that Dustless put in the Gate of Babylon, the density of the demon aura is not even the same as the first-generation ghost blade. With this murderous look, it is not difficult to see that Dustless has completely ignited the hidden flame in Shilyu of the Rain's heart. Witnessing Shilyu of the Rain's hostility, Dustless was unmoved. He seemed to remember the past, his brow wrinkled slightly, and he turned a deaf ear to Shilyu of the Rain's fierceness. "You should have read the letter. What is the reply?" When Hawkeye and Doflamingo invaded Impel Down, the two of them carried Dustless's envelope and handed it to Shilyu of the Rain on the 6th floor of Impel Down. Hearing this, Shilyu of the Rain's invincible momentum suddenly stagnated, and he suddenly realized that there was still such a thing, and the purple demon aura coat was also quickly converged. Clang! The second-generation ghost blade that forced out of the scabbard was put back into the scabbard, and the scarlet killing intent in his eyes was replaced by a color of doubt. Shilyu of the Rain had an incredible expression on his face. He was deeply skeptical of the contents of Dustless's envelope. A person who lives in the current society and you talk about the world 10 years later, everyone feels that he is abnormal. After pondering for a long time, Shilyu of the Rain's eyes showed hesitation. The contents of Dustless's envelope were a fantasy for him. He doesn't seem like the kind of person who likes to play to the gallery. Quietly staring at Dustless, Shilyu of the Rain thought in his heart. Thinking of Dustless's unfathomable strength, his uncertain eyes turned into determination. In this world where the strong are respected, the strongest strength is the only way to go. After hesitating for a moment, Shilyu of the Rain still chose to believe in strength. In this world, only the fist is big can be unscrupulous, and the fist is small can only be beaten passively. The winner is the king and the loser is the bandit. If you can beat me, everything is fine. If not, please do as you please. Shilyu of the Rain said indifferently with a thick cigar in his mouth. Casually throwing away the cigar in his mouth, Shilyu of the Rain savored the thick mellow taste in his mouth. His thick lips opened slightly, and he was about to puff out a smoke ring. Suddenly, a black shadow appeared in front of him and reflected in his pupils. Boom boom boom. The surface of the ground exploded with a bang. Dense cracks extended out like a spider web, swallowing the surrounding ground and splashing up smoke and dust several feet high. In the dust eye, a hazy figure loomed, and it was not difficult to see from the immature outline of the human body that it was by no means Shilyu of the Rain. You bastard! Shilyu of the Rain, whose skin was rough and black, was even more unbearable at the moment. His old face was black, like a black pot that had been used for many years, and it was gloomy like coal. Cough cough cough, Dustless suddenly launched an attack, and the smoke ring that had not yet been spat out also re-entered his abdomen and poured into the depths of his lungs. Shilyu of the Rain coughed violently uncontrollably, his old face was almost green, and his indignation was unbearable. "I haven't pulled out my sword yet, and you sneak attack. Do you want to be shameless? Do you have the bearing of a swordsman?" His sharp eyes stared at Dustless. The cold light that shot out made people shudder. Looking at him, one could feel a burning pain on their skin. "You are a despicable and shameless villain who only knows how to use third-rate means," Shilyu of the Rain roared angrily, his lips trembled with anger, and his eyes were bloodshot. Even because of excessive anger, his voice carried a horrifying scream, and the weird sound waves could penetrate into people's souls, and his whole body trembled uncontrollably. Lying powerlessly in the pit, Dustless's sudden attack had caused fatal damage to Shilyu of the Rain, and his heart was extremely aggrieved. He felt like a clown being played by Dustless, and he didn't even have the power to fight back. "You don't accept it?" Dustless asked indifferently as a foot fell on Shilyu of the Rain's head. Although his face was expressionless, Dustless's contemptuous tone was undisguised, and his eyes, which were as still as a bell, gave Shilyu of the Rain a feeling that no one could shake. He is no exception, and the so-called strongest Whitebeard is no exception. Of course the corner of his mouth twitched fiercely, and Shilyu of the Rain was definitely upset. He was about to satirize Dustless, but the latter was indifferent, and the voice without the slightest emotion suddenly came, making him speechless. "As a swordsman, you were defeated with your bare hands. Do you think you are still a qualified swordsman?" Shilyu of the Rain heard the words and clenched his teeth. His face was unwilling, and his mouth squirmed intending to refute, but he found that he was speechless. The understatement of the sentence was like a bone in his throat, and his throat was stuck and he could not refute it. From ancient times to the present, the winner is king, and the loser is a bandit. It doesn't matter what the means are. The person who can ride on the head of all creatures is the final victor, and history has always been written by the victors. Secondly, as Dustless said, no matter what the reason, a swordsman was defeated with his bare hands, which is an undeniable fact. And because Dustless had taken advantage of the situation to attack before, Shilyu of the Rain opened his observation hockey in advance, and Dustless's every move could not escape his eyes. Even so, the final scene was the same as before, and he was easily defeated with one move. Even if he had made defensive preparations, he could not change the fact. The first time may have been careless, the second time he was relaxed and lazy on the surface, but secretly he was on guard against Dustless. Despite this, he was defeated in the blink of an eye. Chapter 551. As time passed slowly, Shilyu of the Rain's breathing became heavier and heavier. People have dignity and courage, especially the self-esteem and pride of a swordsman. Dustless's foot casually stepped on Shilyu of the Rain's blackened old face, and one could imagine what kind of blow it was to him. The murderous intent in his eyes was as vast and boundless as a torrent, and it was out of control. Buzz buzz buzz, falling to the side, the unsheathed second-generation ghost blade also responded to the humiliation of its master, emitting bursts of sorrow, emitting an evil and deep purple light. Boom boom boom. Driven by humiliation, grief, and indignation, Shilyu of the Rain struggled hard, and his strong and powerful body trembled in resistance. The eruption of hostility went straight to Dustless's head, entering his mind and affecting his reason. A chestnut in the sea is nothing. The negative emotions that were enough to devour and annihilate the whole world burst out, and the external hostility that entered Dustless's mind was instantly suppressed, and it only stirred up a weak ripple before it was cruelly disintegrated. In this world, there was no one who could match Dustless's murderous intent. It seems that my previous thoughts were a bit naive. I thought that defeating your confidence would make you obedient. His eyes narrowed, emitting a dangerous luster, and the foot that stepped on Shilyu of the Rain lifted slightly, and then a large number of photons condensed, and the dark space instantly lit up as bright as day. Maybe letting you sleep quietly for a while is the right decision. Shilyu of the Rain choked when he heard the words, and the shining golden light forced him to close his eyes. Even so, he could still feel the light that was enough to annihilate him. The hostility on his face finally loosened, and he was no longer hostile to Dustless, or it could be said that he had agreed to the conditions in Dustless's envelope. However, it was too late. The sweat on his forehead was evaporated by the blazing light, and the light that swept out from the soles of his feet instantly swallowed him. Boom boom boom, accompanied by a harsh roar, a huge fireball bloomed out of the dark and boundless void, and the center of the battle between Dustless and Shilyu of the Rain was engulfed. Although the strength of the lightspeed kick has been greatly reduced, it's still very dangerous to be hit head-on. Glancing at the charred and unconscious Shiryu of the rain, Dustless's face was full of indifference as he left. Even if Shiryu of the rain really kneels down and begs for mercy, he can't be easily let go. This kind of person was born rebellious and held grudges. If he didn't intimidate or oppress him with force, he might stab him in the back at any time. Beckman, that brat, should have escaped, Dustless muttered to himself in the dark corridor. Now, he looked like he was only 17 or 18 years old. In fact, he had lived 3 lives and was over 50 years old. In his eyes, Beckman was no different from a child who hadn't grown up. Impel Down was surrounded by the sea and isolated from the world. There was only one way to escape, and that was to leave by boat. There was no other way. Suddenly there was a slight vibration on the ground. Dustless stopped and his thinking face suddenly raised. It was a group of pirates who had escaped from the prison. Frowning, Dustless looked at the line of sight that had been passed by before. The dense pirates fell in a pool of blood. Now he was on the 3rd floor of Impel Down and he almost killed all the way. He didn't know how many pirates he had killed during this period. One after another, there's no end to it. Ripples suddenly appeared in his calm eyes, and an invisible energy fluctuation broke out of his body. The pirates who were holding their long swords were instantly annihilated. Haushiku Haki is really suitable for cleaning up the miscellaneous soldiers. Dustless smiled and then quietly slipped away and went straight to the exit of Impel Down. This deep-sea prison was a huge process that Marine headquarters and the world government spent decades to build. It would take a while to get out. About half an hour later, Dustless saw the bright morning sun. Looking around and closing his eyes, the majestic perception spread and the area covered almost the entire Impel Down. He thought that Beckman was still in Impel Down, but he didn't expect that he had already escaped. That group of people. It seems that they are ready to meet me. If you want to escape from Impel Down, the only way is to leave by boat. There are battleships all around, and it is impossible to run the ship by one person. Only by preparing in advance. But you can escape, which is also in line with the ending I want to see. The dry and cracked corners of his mouth quietly rose, and Dustless disappeared into the void. Dustless didn't need to meddle in the rioting prisoners in Impel Down. Although it was an eventful period when Sengoku was the fleet admiral, any crisis was handled by him in an orderly manner. As long as these prisoners were still in Impel Down, they were like turtles in a jar. With the disappearance of Dustless, the source of the chaos, everything calmed down, leaving only the constant devastation and the occasional tremor in Impel Down. At the same time, the duel on the other side also came to an end. In terms of pure swordsmanship, perhaps Red Hair is slightly inferior to Hawkeye, but in terms of comprehensive ability, it is obvious that he is slightly better. However, it is impossible to defeat Hawkeye with this. The scene fell into a stalemate. Both of them were panting and did not admit defeat. They stared at each other's every move. It seems that you are determined to follow that man, Hawkeye. Red Hair Shank said in a hoarse voice as he stared at Hawkeye, who refused to give up. His heart hurt like a knife, and his former best friend became an enemy. This huge contrast even made him collapse and despair. The psychological impact was far greater than the physical impact, and the dozens of scars were not as deep as the impact of Hawkeye's betrayal. Thinking of the crew members who shared weal and woe with him, Red Hair Shanks finally persevered. Come at me. Hawkeye wasn't that strong either, so he didn't want to give up. Come at me. Red Hair Shanks heard the words and completely put aside the entanglement of the past. The hesitation in his heart turned into a resolute determination. He was determined to destroy Hawkeye at all costs. If he doesn't kill him now, maybe in the future it will be his crew members who groan under Hawkeye's black knife. Chapter 552. Now Red Hair Shanks is the opposite of his usual gentle self. His eyes are cold and murderous. Even because of his companions, Hawkeye's control and power are on a higher level. At this moment, Red Hair is still bloodthirsty. Is this the other side of your treatment of the enemy, Shanks? Holding the black sword in both hands, Hawkeye didn't forget to tease Shanks. You seem to be a lot stronger than before. At the same time, your wisdom has decreased a lot. Whiz. Hawkeye's eyes lit up as he noticed that the red-haired Shanks was full of flaws. He raised the black blade in his hand and pounced towards the red-haired Shanks. Ripples appeared in the void as the jade-green sword energy crushed towards the red-haired Shanks. The moment it was about to swallow Red Hair, another change occurred. Bang bang bang, a series of muffled gunshots rang out, followed by several pitch-black bullets that pierced through the awe-inspiring radiance. The awe-inspiring radiance was unscathed, but its fierce momentum was weakened by 70%. Boom! The western sword in his hand was gently raised and threw out a cold light. Hawkeye's attack collapsed and turned into a dense rainstorm. When it came into contact with Red Hair, the power had been greatly reduced and was easily dispersed by him. Bullets covered with armament Hawkeye. Hawkeye frowned deeply and said. Just a few fleeting black bullets were difficult to catch with the naked eye. Only observation Hawkeye can capture the speed of the bullets. Hawkeye keenly found that the bullets wrapped with armament Hawkeye were swallowed by his attack, but it also weakened the power of the attack in a disguised way. When it was close to Red Hair, the power was less than 20%. You bastard! Hawkeye's face changed slightly, and his eyes were hoarse. He had already guessed who the instigator behind the scenes was. His sharp eyes expanded and all the movements around him were taken into his eyes. The people who ambushed him were the crew of Red Hair pirates. You want to involve other people in the personal grievances between you and me? The hands holding the black sword trembled, and Hawkeye's mood splashed huge ripples. The dialogue was full of gunpowder. Hawkeye went to the battle alone, but Red Hair secretly ambushed his crew and dared to interrupt the duel between them. How could Hawkeye not be angry? Staring at the red-haired Shanks in front of him, this was the first time in his life that he felt that the red-haired Shanks was so unfamiliar. That good brother of his who drank and chatted merrily with him in the past seemed to be a disguise. I should have said before that I am not a swordsman, but a pirate. The red-haired Shanks smiled calmly. For pirates, despicable or not, no one cares about these details. It's all up to the winner. A trustworthy pirate is not a good pirate. The competition between us is over. The sword in his hand returned to the scabbard. He closed his eyes and recalled the previous battle. Red Hair said, frankly speaking, I'm not as good as you, the world's greatest swordsman, in terms of swordsmanship. But in terms of overall ability, I'm still slightly better. However, all of this is not important now. His eyes suddenly opened, emitting a dark light that was enough to swallow Hawkeye. Red Hair's cold voice resounded through the sky. The duel between you and me ended ahead of time. Now, it's going to be a war between you and the Akagami, Red Hair, pirates. As Red Hair's powerful roar fell, the surrounding environment was filled with sand and stones. Under the reflection of the sand, several hazy figures swept out one after another. The members of the Akagami, Red Hair, pirates who were secretly peeping finally jumped out of the water. The Akagami, Red Hair, pirates all appeared. That bastard is really shameless. He can do such a shameless thing. In the dense jungle, White Setsu was indignant, but he was not worried. There were many projection Den Mushi beside him, and the other side was connected to Mariewa Dustless. Compared to White Setsu, Dustless is much happier. Howl! A sharp whistling sound resounded through the sky, and a green light cut through the void, followed by a huge chop that was powerful enough to destroy a mountain swept towards the Akagami, Red Hair, pirates. And Hawkeye has already seen the situation and slipped away. In such a critical moment, Hawkeye naturally won't be stupid enough to fight hard. It's useless to show off his courage. If Akagami, red hair, is alone, Hawkeye can fight him, but if the whole Akagami, red hair, pirate ship besieges him together, it will be like ants biting an elephant to death. The crew of the Akagami, red hair, pirates are the elites of the elites, and there is only one way to go if they fight hard. Dustless, who is far away in Mariewa, is living a free and easy life. The image reflected in the Den Mushi in front of him is a live broadcast of Hawkeye and Akagami, accompanied by a peerless beauty. On the left is the indifferent Princess Odoheim, and on the right is Hancock, who is responsible for Dustless's daily life. Your subordinates are being chased to the point of no return, yet you still have the leisure to eat fruits. Princess Odoheim disdained to communicate with Dustless, but the scene in front of her made her speechless. She saw Dustless comfortably swallowing the crystal grape sent by Hancock's jade hand. This lazy look is like a god. The number of times you take the initiative to talk to me is very few. Dustless was slightly surprised, but he didn't think that Princess Odoheim would be fascinated by his style and turn over a new leaf. In the past, Princess Odoheim avoided him, and the chances of her taking the initiative to talk to him were zero. We're a family, don't say 2 words, if you have something to say, you're also my possession. Dustless generously promised Princess Odoheim, but his malicious eyes were hard to believe. Hearing this, Princess Odoheim's eyes flashed. She did have something to ask. After knowing each other for a long time, she also understood Dustless's mind. If she followed his words, she would be safe. If she didn't open her eyes, she would have a serious end. Princess Odoheim has a deep understanding of this. These days, she has been obedient to Dustless, and they get along very well. Chapter 553. Princess E.G. was bashful. She wanted to say something but stopped. Wu Chen's smiling expression was extremely hateful in her eyes. The corners of his mouth were raised high. He was no different from an old fox waiting for a rabbit to come to his door. I don't have anything to ask of you. Turning her head, Princess Aji ignored Wu Chen's gaze. Out of sight, out of mind. The more she spoils Dustless, the worse he will become. After a while, Princess Odoheim has a little understanding of him, and after several summaries, she has found an alternative way to make a living. Boring. Seeing that Princess Odoheim didn't answer, Dustless also retracted his gaze and touched his smooth chin. He is only interested in the prey that will resist, and the sheep that are obedient can't arouse the slightest interest, like chicken bones, it's a pity to throw them away. Sure enough, it's the same as what Hancock said. Seeing that Dustless didn't pay attention to her, Princess Odoheim's mouth raised a smile of conspiracy, and at the same time, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and suddenly found that the previous fierce resistance was simply self-destruction. She behaved obediently. Over time, Wu Chen's interest in her would gradually fade. It's true that people's hearts can't be seen. Hancock's eyes were always observing the scene in the Den Mushi, and it was extremely complicated. In her impression, Akagami is the kind of bold pirate who is very heroic and attaches importance to the existence of his companions. The red-haired man in front of her subverted her previous understanding. This may be the situation. Princess Odoheim also slightly nodded, and there was an incredible look in her eyes as she whispered, I have heard that Akagami Shanks is a person who attaches great importance to friendship. As the queen of the Fishman Island, Princess Odoheim is more knowledgeable than Hancock. Akagami Shanks is an anomaly among the pirates. Among the Yonko, 4 emperors, he is the only one who drifts around without a fixed residence. Whether it is the Whitebeard pirates, the Bigumamu pirates, or the Kaido pirates, the New World has annexed countless islands, only Akagami Shanks is home and roams the world. He is the opposite of those ambitious pirates. Value friendship. Red Hair Shanks is indeed that kind of man. Even if he was slapped in the face, he wouldn't allow others to bully his friends or crew. But that was in the past. Now Hawkeye is on my side, and our positions are different. Hawkeye can hurt his friends at any time, so naturally Red Hair Shanks is eager to kill him. Dustless was quite clear about this. Red Hair Shanks was a person who valued friendship and loyalty, but this rule was only limited to his close friends and companions. Hawkeye, who used to be his best friend, was now his enemy. That was all. To put it bluntly, the red-haired Shanks you respected in the past is just a clown. Dustless added fuel to the fire when he saw Princess Odoheim, and Hancock's eyes were slightly dim. Facts speak louder than words, and there is no need for Dustless to fabricate. What happened in the den mushy in front of him has already explained everything. Treat your friends with respect, but if you are an enemy, you will naturally fight with your sword. Everyone actually has two sides of justice and evil. Red Hair Shanks used to expose his positive and optimistic side, and now it belongs to the other side that few people know. Dustless said bluntly, with a contemptuous attitude towards Red Hair Shanks. It's true that pirates are not good things. After a long silence, Hancock nodded slightly and found that her previous ideas were too naive. She immediately looked at Princess Odoheim and said contemptuously, "Do you think that Whitebeard sheltered your Fishman Island without a purpose?" Stupid. Dustless sneered, and Whitebeard inexplicably found that he had done too many wrong things in half of his life. Sheltering the Fishman Island. It's tantamount to a fantasy. What is a pirate? The pursuit of profit, this is the true portrayal of a pirate. Burning and looting under the loud slogan of pursuing dreams, this is a pirate. Whitebeard is the most powerful pirate with both wisdom and courage. Sheltering the Fishman Island for no reason is unclear. According to Dustless's guess, there must be some unknown purpose. Impossible, he is very friendly to the Fishman Island. Her pretty face changed greatly, and Princess Odoheim argued. During the time when Whitebeard sheltered the Fishman Island, the foreign pirates were low-key, and the Fishman Island became a peaceful paradise. I only believe that no one gets up early without profit. Glancing at Princess Odoheim, Dustless sighed, the fishman's idea is always too pure, and dealing with cunning humans will only lead to deceit. In your impression, Red Hair Shanks is very forthright and unrestrained. But now he and his crew besieged Hawkeye. The white beard you see is only the color on the surface. Only God knows what he really is. Speaking of this, Dustless was too lazy to talk nonsense. Everyone has two sides. Before, Red Hair Shanks exposed only the surface character of people, and now this scene is the darkness in his heart. Each of the Yonko, 4 emperors, of the New World is actually a bloody executioner. Whitebeard and Red Hair Shanks are like this. It is because the world is afraid of their strength, and because each of them stepped on a mountain of corpses, which indirectly laid the foundation for their Yonko, 4 emperors, name. That is to say, everyone also has two sides, and you are no exception. Princess Odoheim is obviously much bolder than the slightly obedient Hancock. Dustless smiled and did not deny it, and seriously replied, "Yes." What about your dark side? Princess Odoheim blinked and asked curiously. Akagami, this kind of person, could give up everything to kill Hawkeye. Once Dustless broke out, she was curious about what unexpected things would happen. God knows, Dustless shrugged, and at the same time, he couldn't help but think about Whitebeard's intentions and purposes for sheltering the Fishman Island. It is certain that his thoughts are not simple. There must be other plans. Chapter 554. A pirate with a high bounty means that their hands are stained with more blood. There is no reason for the strongest butcher like Whitebeard to shelter the Fishman Island for no reason. Impossible, he must be, you are just deceiving yourself. I am afraid that you can't even deceive yourself. Dustless waved his hand and interrupted Princess Odoheim's speech, and said indifferently. There is no profit, this is the truth that will never change. Princess Otoheim's face was blue when she heard this, and she wanted to refute but she was speechless. After thinking about it, Whitebeard, a big pirate, sheltering the Fishman Island for no reason is indeed somewhat unreasonable and extraordinary. It is extremely difficult to find an excuse that can convince and deceive her. You want to get the protection of the government, but you are sworn brothers with Whitebeard, an enemy. Shaking his head, Dustless sighed that Princess Otoheim's idea was ridiculous and naive. She wanted to join the world government and get protection, but she secretly became sworn brothers with Whitebeard. This way of stepping on two boats is only self-destruction. Whitebeard, although I don't know what you're plotting, but you'd better not have that kind of thought, or else, humph. Wu Chen snorted with a bone-chilling light in his eyes. The dragon has a reverse scale and it will die. The relationship between Roger and Whitebeard is unusual. It is not ruled out that he told Whitebeard the content of the poneglyph, and after witnessing the strength of the world government, Whitebeard also moved other thoughts. He wants to defeat the world government and Marine in an alternative way, or simply to protect his sons. Don't tell me you're saying that her intentions are. Princess Otoheim's face was ugly, and the reason why Dustless valued her was clear for a long time. Hearing this, Dustless nodded silently this time. Although it was only a guess at the moment, there was only one thing on the Fishmen Island that could attract a legendary figure like Whitebeard. I told you before that everyone has two sides. Don't think of Whitebeard as a sheep. The old man is actually a beast that can devour everything. Dustless said seriously. Whitebeard doesn't know some poneglyph, but his best friend, One Piece, Gold, Roger does know many unknown secrets. It was not impossible to tell Whitebeard some important information. There's an 80% chance that they're here for the Sea King. However, I hope that old man knows what's good for him. Dustless's gaze fell on Princess Otoji's body. He gently patted her shoulder and said with a pleasant smile, "There is no need to worry. When I let you go, I left my power in you and your mother. With the birth of Shirahoshi, my power has also been transferred to her. If Whitebeard dares to act rashly, he will be caught in his own trap." I hope so. Princess Aji nodded worriedly. Although it's just Dustless's guess, the only thing that can attract Whitebeard on Fishman Island is the ancient weapon, Sea King. The source of Whitebeard's news is naturally Roger, the Pirate King. Although Whitebeard is a pirate, he is not a brainless man. He knows what's more important. He won't touch the key to open Pandora's ink box unless he has to. He can't afford such a price and consequences. Taking advantage of the situation, he took Princess Aji into his arms. Wu Chen explained while taking advantage of her. Unlike before, Princess Otoji did not resist this time. Her eyes were dotted with pitiful hesitation and helplessness. Instead of refusing Dustless, she grabbed his clothes. It seems that only when her heart is empty and flustered can she calm down. If Whitebeard really wants to rob Shirahoshi, no one on Fishman Island can stop him. The only life-saving straw is Dustless. Don't worry, Whitebeard is not a god. He may only know that the Sea King exists on Fishman Island. He doesn't know who it is. Dustless comforted her softly. The poneglyph only records the location of the ancient weapon. It doesn't detail who it is. Looking at today's world, the people who know that Shirahoshi is the Sea King are definitely not more than 5. The reason why Princess Otoji knew was that Dustless told her impatiently. That man seems to have landed on the island, Master. Hancock said with a smile, and her voice was like the sound of nature, making people addicted. Dustless glanced at her faintly and then nodded slightly. His eyes moved away from Princess Otoji's body and stared at the image reflected in the Den Mushi. What came into view was the embarrassed Beckman. This savior finally appeared. Otherwise, Hawkeye might have been besieged by Akagami, red hair, pirates, and died. Beckman came to Hawkeye's rescue. This carefully arranged script is good. Dustless's mouth outlined a gloomy smile, and his tone was unusually hoarse. Princess Otoji and Hancock, sitting next to Dustless, looked at each other and could see the looming fear in each other's eyes. The only fortunate thing is that this gloomy taste is not directed at the two of them. Don't tell me you're counting on Beckman to help Hawkeye. Patting her chest, Princess Otoheim tried her best to remain calm and asked curiously. Hancock also tilted her head and looked at Dustless with her smart eyes. Apparently, she was also looking forward to Dustless's answer. It's true. When I saw him a few months ago, I left something special in his body, but because my ability was too strange, Beckman couldn't detect it. Dustless said lightly as if he had done a trivial thing. He quietly tasted the hot tea in his hand, but the evil smile on the corner of his mouth was enough to make people retreat. He looked at Beckman with contempt, the joy reflected in his eyes was clearly visible. Wu Chen's face was full of contempt and disdain. What awaited Beckman was not the joy of reuniting after so many hardships, but the complete fall from heaven to hell. Chapter 555. Crossing the endless sea and experiencing countless twists and turns, what brought the crew under the flag was not the joy after the reunion, but the shadow that could not be waved away. There is nothing more ironic than this. Princess Otoheim looked at Dustless with cold legs and finally understood his intentions. Thinking of Dustless's crazy ideas, her whole body trembled slightly. Killing people is nothing more than a nod of the head, the cruel borrowing of a knife to kill people. Such a practice may lead to the Akagami, red hair, pirates falling apart like a plate of loose sand. Don't show such an incredible expression, this is called retribution. It's all Red Hair Shank's fault, and he has to pay the price for meddling in other people's business. Seeing Princess Otoheim's pupils widening, Dustless said helplessly, his face full of disapproval. He didn't feel that it was too much. It is true that he can crush the conspiracy of the Akagami, red hair, pirates, but the effect is different from that of the vice-captain. The vice-captain, who usually gives trust, suddenly starts to attack his own crew one day, and the effect is absolutely unprecedented. Even if he can't wipe out the Akagami, red hair, pirates, there are very few people who are willing to follow Akagami, red hair, pirates in the future. That kid has taken an inch and taken a mile again and again. Does he think that Yonko, for emperors, can do whatever he wants? If I don't teach him a lesson, he will really think that I am mud. Dustless sneered again and again, and his whole body was covered with deep cold air. The current red hair was quite scheming, but he had not yet reached the level of perfection. At such a young age, he had become one of the four emperors whose name shook the world at the age of 30. It was normal for him to have an arrogant attitude because of his talent. Understanding is understanding. If you want Dustless to agree with it, it is a dream. It is just right to take advantage of the arrest of Beckman this time to defeat the Akagami, red hair, pirates and drive them out of the New World. Isn't it self-destruction to do this? Consort Aji's chest tightened as she nervously asked. She knew that Dustless was very strong, but she didn't think he had the strength to contend with the four emperors. Those arrogant pirates were all peerless powerhouses who had experienced hundreds of battles. Every one of the Yonko, four emperors, can be called an invincible monster existence. In a duel in a one-to-one state, even if an admiral of the Marine headquarters goes on the field, the one who will be trampled in the end will definitely be the admiral. For example, Whitebeard is the strongest pirate among the Yonko, four emperors. Now in his heyday, he is invincible. His strength is enough to crush all opponents. Even if Red Hair Shanks was not as good as Whitebeard, he believed that he would not be too bad. You're right, it was indeed self-destruction. However, the one who self-destructed was Red Hair Shanks. Dustless's lips curled into a cold arc as he spoke emotionlessly. Sister Aji is worried, young master will definitely win. Hancock grinned and showed a bright smile. She was full of confidence in Dustless. Others may not know, but the defeat of 100 Beast Kaido a few days ago was still vivid in Hancock's mind. Beckman, who had come ashore in a hurry, had a desolate look on his face. His eyes were dim and his face was as pale as snow. Looking at his waist, there were still dark red bloodstains. As time passed, they had slowly coagulated into scars. The piercing pain from all over his body had numbed his nerves. This conspicuous scar was left by Wu Qin. On the surface, it didn't look very fatal, but in fact, it almost took his life. If it wasn't for his many years of painstakingly practicing body arts and training an indestructible body, the consequence of being hit head-on by that kick would have been his corpse separated from his head. The escape from Impel Down had left an indelible impression in Beckman's heart. His heart was full of mixed feelings. It was the first time he realized that he was so fragile. The enemy was in front of him, but he could only flee like a mouse. The blow it brought was indescribable. It seems that Captain has already started. His wings are full, I can only break them one by one. Quickly adjusting his mentality, Beckman's eyes lit up, dragging his exhausted body, his observation hockey expanded and he slowly walked towards the center of the fight. Only by annihilating all these dogs first can he hit the power to deal with Dustless. Although it is only a passive strategy, it is the most effective strategy so far. About half an hour later, Beckman found the traces of Akagami, Red Hair, and others, as well as Hawkeye who was forced by the crew of Akagami, Red Hair, pirates. The bloody traces all over his body were clearly visible. Who can hurt you like this? Seeing Beckman appear, Akagami, Red Hair, Shanks asked in surprise and his heart was shocked. The fire that was enough to swallow the endless sky flashed away. Akagami, Red Hair, Shanks values friendship and loyalty, and his character of valuing his companions is known to the world. The trusted vice captain was severely injured, and it immediately aroused the boiling killing intent in his heart. It doesn't matter, that man is not something we can deal with now. Beckman smiled bitterly, and his deep eyes were not as wise as before, and they were very dim. Akagami, Red Hair, Shanks looked stiff, and he naturally understood the man in Beckman's air. He unwillingly clenched his huge fist and finally could only sigh helplessly. The current gap between him and Dustless really made him helpless. I'm fine, I'm just slightly injured. It's still because my strength is not enough. With a self-deprecating look on his face, Beckman said weakly. The whole person is like a willow fluttering in the wind, drifting with the waves. A group of Akagami, Red Hair, pirates saw this scene with mixed feelings and looked guilty. The vice captain almost died and fell and Impel Down. They could only watch and couldn't play any role. It was not difficult to guess what they were thinking. Now the goal is him. With all his strength, Beckman changed the topic and brought the problem to Hawkeye's head. When he was about to kill Hawkeye with Akagami, Red Hair, Shanks, his eyes were strangely empty. The black eyes were shining with an evil luster, the corners of his mouth were high, revealing a ferocious evil smile, and his momentum was very strange. Suddenly he turned his head and locked his eyes on the members of Akagami, Red Hair, pirates. His eyes also changed dramatically. Chapter 556. Akagami, Red Hair, stared at Beckman with a frown and suddenly realized that something was wrong. He instinctively perceived the danger, but out of their feelings for each other for many years, he didn't think that Beckman would harm him or his companions. Beckman, you, Akagami, Red Hair, was full of doubts as he looked at Beckman, who was full of evil temperament. His eyebrows were deeply squeezed together, and an obvious chuan appeared between his eyebrows. The sudden strange dark temperament always felt like déjà vu. At some time in the past, he seemed to have experienced this kind of different aura from someone familiar. Is it, my Hawk, who was beaten by a group of people, showed a glimmer of hope in his desperate eyes, and a pair of strange scarlet eyes appeared in his mind. His slightly sluggish spirit was swept away and he was full of energy in an instant. The crew of the Akagami, Red Hair, pirates stared at Beckman. The usually gentle and approachable vice-captain was like a monster in human skin at this moment, and he had become a monster inside. Under everyone's shocked gazes, a monstrous black flame was brewing in Beckman's eyes. His dry and cracked lips parted slightly, and a pitch-black willow, the wisp that could annihilate everything in the world, burst out. Amaterasu. The fire of the netherworld swallowed the surroundings in an instant, and the undying fire was surging, strange and unpredictable beyond imagination, and even burned on a small pool, unable to be extinguished. All of the crew members were stunned. They had not expected this sudden situation. They turned their heads and suddenly felt a burning pain on their skin. Their bodies were also occupied by this black fire. Some people didn't even have time to scream, and they were directly swallowed by the Amaterasu, without leaving any bones, and even the dregs disappeared out of thin air, leaving only dark flames on the ground. Damn it, it hurts. What kind of fire is this, and it can't be extinguished? Bastard, why are you doing this to your own people? The crew members who were tragically swallowed by the black flames roared in panic, and their tone was full of hatred. The vice-captain, who they usually trusted most, suddenly attacked them, and they were shocked and angry. The reason why they weren't swallowed was that some of them had already learned the entry skills of armament hockey, and they could turn their bodies into an indestructible steel defense. However, even so, it was still unspeakably painful and torturous. Being able to die was a blessing from the heavens. The pain of being roasted by the Amaterasu made them wish they were dead. In the blink of an eye, there were only a few crew members left in the entire Akagami, Red Hair, pirates. Only a small number of elites remained. Most of these people were outstanding existences with observation hockey or armament hockey. Beckman, give me an explanation. Looking around at the scattered crew members, the red-haired Shanks's eyes were about to split open. Boundless murderous intent erupted from him as he roared at Beckman. At the moment when the black fire burned, Akagami, Red Hair, was also swallowed. His armament hockey was superb and he used hockey defense in an instant to survive. His body was only slightly burned, but the mental blow was unparalleled. You're not Beckman. Who the hell are you? Narrowing his eyes, red-haired Shanks realized that something was wrong. He locked his gaze on Beckman and clenched his fists. The black flame was clearly some kind of mysterious ability. Beckman was not an ability user, or there was no ability user in the Akagami, Red Hair, pirates. Once a person is angry, his reason and actions will be full of flaws and various fatal loopholes will appear all over his body. This is the case with Akagami, Red Hair, in front of him. His hockey raged uncontrollably and his momentum was monstrous. He was like a lion with messy red hair and a black cloak dancing without wind. At this moment, a black afterimage galloped over. The eagle's eyes jumped with a threatening chill. Like a storm, it raged in front of Akagami, Red Hair. The cold light jumped up and printed on the chest of Akagami, Red Hair, forever. Hey! Poochie! With the roar of steel, the galloping cold light broke through the defense of Akagami, Red Hair. His chest suddenly split open and the long and narrow knife wound was clearly visible. The angry red-haired Shanks's face was as pale as paper, and his body swayed and almost fell to the ground. The initiator of this is Iris, without any emotion, only thousands of indifferent eagle eyes, staring blankly at Akagami, Red Hair, and immediately kicked him away. This is just politeness, Shanks. Staring at Akagami, Red Hair, who flew out, Hawkeye said coldly. Looking around, his body was also full of large and small wounds. His condition was not much better than Akagami, Red Hair. The blood stains have dyed Hawkeye's clothes scarlet. Good job, Hawkeye. Nodding with satisfaction, Beckman smiled and said in a frivolous tone. Akagami, Red Hair, Shanks gritted his teeth and stood up. The crew of the Akagami, red hair, pirates who survived flocked over and looked at his injuries with worry. It turned out to be you. I always felt that Beckman's evil temperament was familiar, and now there is always contempt and indifference in his tone. It turned out to be you. Staring at Beckman, the figure of Dustless appeared in his mind. Carefully comparing, it was almost 10 times similar. This is the unique technique of the Sharingan, called the transcription seal, but because this guy doesn't have the Sharingan, it is not perfect. It can only store a small amount of chakra, and the power is only a few layers. Otherwise, maybe all the Akagami, red hair, pirates would have been killed. Beckman said in a rather regretful tone. The meaning of his words was obviously that the Akagami, red hair, pirates were lucky. The transcription seal technique can only be stored in the Sharingan to ensure a perfect fit. With Dustless's current strength, he can force it to remain in the eyes of others without being noticed by the other party. It is also very difficult to do, and only a small amount of chakra can be stored. The power displayed is also not satisfactory, but according to the current situation, it is not important. Chapter 557. The red-haired Shanks glared angrily. Numerous ferocious blue veins appeared on his forehead, almost covering his entire face. He panted heavily and stared at Beckman with his scarlet eyes. He forcibly suppressed his raging hatred, and his right arm trembled as he held the Western sword. If you want to kill me, then come at me. Now there is not much chakra left in him. It is extremely difficult to maintain this state, let alone attack. With a mocking smile on his face, Beckman patted his chest and signaled Red Hair to slash here. Red Hair Shanks was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. Seeing this scene, Red Hair's killing intent increased and his face became more and more ugly. He was not an idiot. Now Dustless was only occupying Beckman's body. If he attacked rashly, the one who would be hurt would be Beckman and not Dustless. After thinking about it, Red Hair was not anxious in such an embarrassing situation. Instead, he was unusually calm. His breathing gradually calmed down and the chills swept away. He regained his calmness. He still had the upper hand in the current situation. At least the remaining crew members could escape unscathed. Often when the situation was more critical, the unshakable mentality could ensure that they could get through the difficulties safely. Turning danger into safety, they needed to face it calmly. This kid was able to come this far and successfully stabilize the position of Yonko at such a young age. In addition to his strength, his mature mind also played a decisive role. Beckman, who was guided by Dustless's consciousness, nodded slightly and secretly sighed that Yonko was not easy to deal with. Your enemy is right in front of you. Are you going to watch him go free? With a sneer, Dustless continued to provoke. His tone was light as if life was nothing, and his eyes were filled with disdain as if the crew members who were burned into nothingness by Amaterasu were trash. Even though Red Hair Shanks's expression didn't change, his breathing became heavy again. Dustless's words were like a sharp thorn that fiercely stabbed into his heart. Red Hair's body trembled slightly and an indescribable grievance arose spontaneously. The enemy was so close, but he was helpless. The feeling in his heart was self-evident. What exactly is your goal? If you were to act personally, it would be much faster. Why do you have to go through so much trouble? Doing this won't do you any good. Red-haired Shanks asked with a dark face. At this moment, he was no different from a volcano on the verge of erupting. His entire body was filled with a destructive and violent heat that could not be approached. What's his purpose? Don't get carried away. Do you think you have something I need? Hearing that, Dustless used an extremely lazy tone to speak. Akagami, red hair, pirates have no money and no power. It can be said that they are poor. Among the Yonko, four emperors, only Akagami, red hair, Shanks's power is the most fragile, but the crew is the elite of the elite, all of them are veteran strong. Of course, red hair Shanks wasn't interested in material benefits. As for the reason for not letting go of your pirates, if you have to find a reason. Scratching his head helplessly, Dustless seemed to be very entangled and said in a low voice, looking at your ugly appearance after killing each other, this is the picture I am looking forward to. The casual words made everyone, including Akagami, red hair, angry, and they immediately planned to fight. Thinking that the physical attack would be borne by Beckman, their hearts were extremely uncomfortable. It was more uncomfortable than eating 10 pounds of flies. Especially the smile in his eyes made them want to vomit blood, silently telling them that I am here and I promise not to run. Come and hit me if you have the guts. There was a flash of light in his mind, and Akagami, red hair, Shanks understood Dustless's intentions in the blink of an eye. You despicable bastard, I will definitely kill you with my own hands in the future to comfort those souls who cannot rest in peace in the underworld. The red-haired Shanks clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked as he spoke in a threatening tone. Dustless's move was very vicious. Not only did he let Beckman bear the notoriety of killing each other, but he also cut off the retreat of the Akagami, red hair, pirates. Who would join a pirate group that kills each other? Even though the red-haired Shanks did not care about these things, and he could laugh off the ridicule from the outside world, he could not bear to see his best friend carry such a heavy bad reputation, and live with his spine being poked at for the rest of his life. He thought that Sengoku was despicable enough and liked to play tricks. Now compared with Dustless, Sengoku is much cuter. The new fleet admiral of the Marines still pays attention to the bottom line, and Dustless can use any despicable means without mercy to achieve his goals. Don't put on such a scary expression, I think you should thank me. You are a group of pirates, nothing more than to stand out. Tomorrow the name Beckman will spread all over the world. Controlling the body of Beckman, Dustless laughed. Staring at the red-haired Shanks who wanted to tear himself into pieces, grind his bones and scatter his ashes, but he could only hold it back. He was almost angry to the point of internal injury. At the same time, he gave Hawkeye a look. There is no need to fight with the Akagami, red hair, pirates. Chakra has been exhausted, and being outnumbered is only one reason. The second reason is that the Akagami, red hair, pirates have been hit hard, and the new world is bound to become the prey of others. If they want to continue their journey, they can only withdraw from the new world and avoid the sharp edge. Hawkeye nodded slightly, and the black sword in his hand returned to his back. He took a deep look at Akagami, red hair, Shanks, then turned and flashed into the dense jungle and disappeared. The so-called Shichibukai and Yonko, four emperors, are not at the same level. Hawkeye, who retreated quickly, sighed and looked at the wounds all over his body. His eyes couldn't help but dim. If Dustless hadn't arrived in time and attacked him with incredible means, he would have been besieged to death. At this moment, the Akagami, red hair, pirates are celebrating the killing of the world's best swordsman on the sea. Don't chase, it's not necessary. Looking at the disappearing figures in the jungle, Akagami, red hair, Shanks waved his hand and stopped the crew from chasing. The plan has evolved to such a step and has completely failed. The flawless plan failed because of the influence of Dustless, and the culprit was his deputy captain. Chapter 558. Red hair Shanks frowned tightly. He didn't know what Dustless was thinking, but there was suddenly an inexplicable voice in his heart telling him to run away immediately. It was indeed a bit abrupt, but it was unusually true. However, red hair Shanks still chose to act rationally and completely ignored his inner instincts. There was no other reason than that after he slipped away, his vice-captain would definitely become a turtle in a jar. It was impossible for him to give up on Beckman, and the principle of valuing his companions would never change. Don't worry, It's not just your Akagami, red hair, pirates, but the other pirates around the island will also be buried with him. Seeing the sweat on Red Hair Shank's temples becoming more and more obvious, Dustless softly, kindly advised him. Hearing this, the optimistic Red Hair Shanks just showed a smile on his face. Although it looked extremely far-fetched, it also highlighted his cheerful mentality, showing that he was not afraid of death. Is that so? I didn't expect you, who regarded life as grass, to be so kind. Holding the western sword in his hand, Red Hair Shank said bluntly. In such an urgent state of mind, he was still calm and had already put life and death out of his mind. I hope you can be so calm when you go to heaven. Beckman said indifferently with murderous intent in his eyes. This cold tone was indeed like what the red-haired Shanks had said before. It was full of contempt for all living things, and its words revealed a sense of superiority. Unlike the red-haired Shanks, Wuchen thought that it should be so. The weak were naturally dominated by the strong. The law of the jungle was the law of the jungle. Every world was nothing more than this. Without strength, you would be trampled by the enemy. If you wanted to live safely, you could only become the top predator in the food chain. It was precisely because of this idea of being vigilant in times of peace that Wuchen could take this step today. Closing his eyes, Beckman was too lazy to talk nonsense with Red Hair Shanks. This kind of pirate mentality has been deeply ingrained, and it is nonsense to say more. Rotten wood can't be carved. Is it coming? Seeing Beckman coldly close his eyes, red-haired Shanks felt his hair stand on end. He looked at Dustless warily. As long as Dustless's remaining power in Beckman's body disappeared with the wind, he would seize the opportunity to take back Beckman. Victory or defeat was no longer important to him. Dustless squinted his eyes and peered at the red-haired man. His hoarse voice was filled with a hint of playfulness. Clearly, Dustless was looking forward to the scene when the red-haired Shanks saw the calamitous seismic star. After a while, the tightly shut eyes suddenly opened. The remaining Beckman and the chakra in his body were located. His eyes opened and emitted a dim light. Mariewa Dustless and Dustless controlled Beckman spoke at the same time. Their cold voices lingered in the world for a long time without dissipating. Tingai quaking star. The quaint vicissitudes of life filled the entire island. It contained magic, causing a flaw in the unstoppable time. In an instant, everything came to an end. The remaining chakra in Beckman's body was also exhausted in an instant. He fell to the ground in exhaustion. Is this guy trying to play to the gallery? The moment Beckman fell to the ground, red-haired Shanks turned into an afterimage and rushed over. He then looked around at the unchanged environment and frowned. Cough, cough, cough. At this moment, the silent Beckman suddenly woke up. It seemed that his consciousness was still in a daze and he couldn't speak sensitively. He just tried to raise his finger and point to the sky. Seeing this, red-haired Shanks was stunned and subconsciously looked at the sky. At the same time, the cloudless void suddenly darkened. Only the sky and the sea more than 10 kilometers away were still in a clear state. In the dark sky, for some reason, it was extremely difficult to breathe. Gulp. Are you kidding me? How can this happen? This is beyond the limits of the devil fruit. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this is the power of God. Fearing that his old eyes were blurry, red-haired Shanks rubbed his eyes and unconsciously snorted. His pupils suddenly shrank, and he looked as if he had seen a ghost. Following red-haired Shanks' line of sight, an unprecedentedly large meteorite slowly fell from the sky. The entire sky of the sea was gloomy and filled with despair. It was all brought about by this sudden meteorite. Red-haired Shanks' expression was extremely ugly. At least ghosts could be defeated, but this meteorite that was more than 10 kilometers in size was definitely an existence that could not be defeated. Hee hee. Is this the technique that guy was talking about? A technique that can't be escaped no matter how hard you try. I thought that he had casually made it up. Now it seems that it really is a well-deserved reputation. After being stunned for a moment, it was followed by a wave of helpless bitter self-ridicule. At first, he still held on to a fluke in his heart and thought that Wu Qin was speaking empty words. Now, this cruel fact caused him to be speechless. The pirates around the island were also full of despair. Their eyes were numb and dull as they stared at the slowly falling meteorite and the attack range that covered the island. The pirates who wanted to escape just sat down and recalled the wonderful scenes of the past. Because after this, they would never have the chance to taste those beautiful memories again. Only those pirates who were full of a strong desire to survive fled desperately, but in any case, they still couldn't avoid the lock of the Ting'ai. Damn it. Maybe it's just like what Hawkeye said before. That man was deliberately created by God to mock our ignorance and weakness. Red-haired Shank said in a gloomy and hoarse voice, but his footsteps didn't stop as he carried Beckman and ran towards the sea. An optimistic mentality has been developed, and Shanks was born to be the kind of person who won't give up easily. What's more, the island was surrounded by the sea, and neither of them were ability users. Their physique was strong, so the probability of escape was not impossible. Chapter 559. Beckman's face was full of surprise, and his mind was shaken. The image reflected in his eyeball was replaced by the slowly falling meteorite, and he was extremely speechless. The meteorites that appeared out of nowhere were like small mud balls that one could pinch with one's hand. There were as many as one wanted, and there was no end to them. The endless meteorites filled the sky, and the surrounding sea was dark. The pirates who were fleeing in all directions were stunned as they looked up at the meteorites in the sky. They thought that they were going to heaven, but they once again fell into hell, and the hope in their hearts instantly disappeared. There was no need to deliberately lock onto the target. It was just an indiscriminate attack, and it was useless to retreat to the end of the world. The island that couldn't withstand the attack of the second meteorite would inevitably explode, and the resulting waves would be enough to swallow everything in the world. Let's kill that meteorite together. Some pirates who were unwilling to leave the world used all kinds of abilities to bombard the meteorite falling from the sky. All kinds of ability users used all their strength to try to slow down the meteorite's falling speed, but the effect was minimal. The surface of the meteorite only splashed dust, and the dust that peeled off was negligible. It couldn't shake him at all. The second meteorite continued to fall slowly, covering the sky. The area covered by the black shadow was silent, and it was dead silent. All in all, no matter how they escaped, it was useless. The falling meteorite oppressed everyone's nerves, and even some pirates who couldn't withstand the pressure fell to the ground, foaming at the mouth and fainting, slowly waiting for death. This was 10 times more uncomfortable than directly killing them with a sword. Red Hair Shanks, F***K your ancestors, aren't they known as the Yonko that ruled the world? Come out and show your peerless side. Bullshit, Yonko, they are all just fence-sitters. Idiot, stop dreaming. That Red Hair Shanks is just a villain who ran away when he saw the situation wasn't good. Do you really think that he will jump out like a savior to save the world? This is just a fairy tale, there's no rush in dreaming when you die. In the face of such a desperate situation, the pirates who couldn't bear it finally exposed their ugly nature and began to complain about the initiator, Red Hair Shanks. They didn't care about the situation and began to express their condolences to Red Hair Shanks and his family. For a moment, he made a fool of himself. Since he was going to die anyway, he might as well express his condolences to his family before he died. That way, he could barely take advantage of them verbally. The rude pirates naturally had no scruples when they scolded people, and their merciless abuse was hard to listen to. These bastards. Red-haired Shanks twitched his mouth, and his face turned green. He was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. With a high-level observation hockey, he inevitably heard the complaints of this group of fleas. He and Hawkeye didn't inform these grasshead kings. They all came from all over the world with the mentality of watching a play. They were the ones who were implicated and complained about him. They deserved to be smashed to death. Shanks, there's no need to worry. They're just trying to shift the fear in their hearts, Beckman comforted him. Red-haired Shanks had been implicated even when he was lying down. The mastermind behind the scenes is also dushless, and it has nothing to do with them. Unfortunately, seeing is believing, and they have nothing to say to refute it. The world will think that red-haired Shanks has done something outrageous, and then attract the revenge of God's meteorite. It's logical. His cold eyes spread out, taking in the dying island and the falling meteorite into his eyes. Red-haired Shanks, who turned his grief into motivation, dived into the bottom of the sea and fled frantically with all his strength. Dushless, who is far away in Mariewa, can't observe the scene of the destruction of the world, but the consequences of the various irresistible factors caused by the impact of two meteorites on the sea can be imagined. Fortunately, the island where red-haired Shanks and Hawkeye dueled is a deserted island, and most of the islands scattered around are dead islands with no people. It doesn't matter if they are swallowed and dismembered. No one will care. Every year, countless islands sink in the New World because of various factors. Beckman, that thick-skinned guy, didn't even apologize with his death. He killed his companions with his own hands, and he's still alive. Wu Chen lamented, thumping his chest and stamping his feet. He felt that it wasn't worth it to lose those crew members. Princess Odoheim was speechless. Obviously, you used other people's hands to kill other people's crew, but you shamelessly put a black hat on someone else's head. She also suddenly realized that Dushless is not as terrifying as she imagined. At least he occasionally jokes, and there is indeed an essential difference between him and other Tenryubito. Jinbe has joined the 7 warlords of the sea, and the original condition was to pardon all the fishmen except Tiger. You want me to let Tiger go? Glancing at Princess Odoheim, Dustless immediately understood her intentions. Princess E.G. gently nodded when she heard this. She looked at Wu Chen from the corner of her eyes. Seeing that his expression was as calm as water, her tense heart also relaxed. She sighed secretly that there was a chance. However, the next sentence caused Princess Aji's beautiful face to collapse. To me, this is indeed a small matter that is as easy as pie. But I think you also understand that he boldly broke into Mariewa, so it's not reasonable to let him go so easily. Looking at Princess Odoheim, Dustless said with a smile, and the meaning revealed in his tone was quite simple. He can let them go, but he needs chips. Princess Odoheim is not an ordinary person. She used to be the princess of the Fishman Island, and she has seen pirates like Dustless. Her shrewdness is also quite good. She immediately understood Dustless's intentions and asked bluntly, "What are your conditions?" Dustless smiled when he heard the words, and then put his mouth next to Princess Odoheim. Her jade fingers tightly grasped the corner of her clothes, and Princess Odoheim's face was slightly red. She thought that Dustless would put forward dirty conditions, but the content of his words made her face strange. It's that simple. Looking at Dustless with a puzzled face, Princess Odoheim was suspicious of this. Dustless glanced at Princess Odoheim faintly, then nodded silently, and the serious expression on his cheeks also dispelled Princess Odoheim's doubts. Chapter 560. Sakazuki was so tactful that he silently explained everything. Only Sengoku and Sengoku could make such a stubborn person like him change his mind. Only then would he not dare to act rashly. It's just a trivial matter. Even if he knows, Sengoku can't change the reality. Even if he is dissatisfied, he can only endure it. For the sake of Caesar and my invincibility, he won't do this kind of losing business. He raised his head and looked at the exquisitely decorated ceiling. It was dust-free and light. In the world where the strong are respected, the right to speak is in the hands of the strongest. Dustless, whose fist is bigger than Sengoku, stood in the most favorable position from the beginning to overlook the development of the situation, and then he influenced the development of the situation in his own favor. Dustless's identity and strength are above Sengoku. He has absolute power and unparalleled strength. After the combination of the two, any strategy is self-humiliating and the effect is negligible. This is the case every time. The real hunter who gains is Dustless. It really makes Sengoku's stomach ache and tired of dealing with it. He has been in the position of Fleet Admiral for some time, but he has no achievements to speak of. It is inevitable that people will gossip about him. Not only that, the establishment of Shichibukai is a manifestation of his incompetence. If the Marine has real ability, there is no need to establish this deformed organization composed entirely of pirates to suppress pirates. Eat inside and betray outside. Princess Otoheim snorted. As a Tenryubito of the world government, he secretly fought against the world conquest and the Marine. What is this if not eating inside and betraying outside? Hearing this, Dustless's face did not change. He never felt that he was teammates with the government or the Marine in the trenches. He is afraid that the Marine is the same. The two are completely different from each other. It is naturally impossible to eat inside and betray outside. At the end of the day, Dustless was just a master of both the underworld and underworld. Whether it is the Marine or the government, in the eyes of Dustless, they are the same kind of people. No one is right and no one is wrong. The only one who can really judge whether they are righteous or evil is the final winner. Since you took the initiative to make a move, then I can only return the favor. Test me. I can only passively fight back. The hostility in his eyes disappeared in a flash. Dustless smiled. It would be impolite not to return the favor. On the blue sea surface, the salty sea breeze blew, and the reflection of dozens of naval warships could be seen on the surface of the water. The unique flag and the unique silhouette of the warships could only be seen in the navy. Sakasuji's entire body was wrapped up so tightly that only his bronze cheeks could be seen. His old face, however, looked extremely ugly. The hostility in his old eyes was clearly visible. Bastard! The massive fist easily punched through the deck, leaving a scorching red fist print. Sakasuji was like a human-shaped weapon that only knew how to kill. Its entire body was suffused with an oppressive aura, causing the entire ship to heat up for no reason, the temperature instantly rising dozens of times. The magma fruit was extraordinarily powerful, and it wasn't hard to see that Sakasuji had reached the pinnacle of perfection in its application and development. Akainu's eyes gloomily looked at the handcuffed man in the distance with pale skin. Akainu was extremely aggrieved, and his body uncontrollably erupted hot magma, burning through and melting the deck. Let me go. Do you know who's protecting me now? Come and untie this grandpa. Arrogant, condescending screams suddenly sounded. Looking in the direction of the voice, it was Kaiser who was locked up by Seastone. In fact, when Dustless called, Kaiser was already captured by Sakasuji and was on the way to the headquarters. Kaiser clearly heard the conversation between Sakasuji and Dustless in the Den Mushi. Release him from Seastone's handcuffs. His old face twitched. Even if he was unwilling, Sakasuji was powerless to change the reality. He wasn't an idiot. On the surface he may look like a brute who only knows how to use force, but in fact, he's a meticulous person. Dustless's words in the Den Mushi already hinted that Kaiser was his subordinate. It can also be speculated that unscrupulously attacking Kaiser's opponent will immediately be met with the fiercest retaliation from Dustless. The soldiers on the warship looked at each other and stepped forward to release Kaiser's handcuffs. Sakasuji's will is above everything, and going against him is a dead end. Pack up your things and get out of here before I go back on my word. Waving his hand, Sakasuji issued the expulsion order. He suddenly felt that he was the most aggrieved vice admiral in history. There was nothing more ironic than releasing the enemy he captured with his own hands intact. After communicating with Dushless, he contacted Fleet Admiral Sengoku. Releasing Kaiser was Sengoku's order, and Sakasuji couldn't do anything. In the end, the Marine Headquarters is a department of the world government, and the world government serves the celestial dragons, and Dustless's identity is unusual, and falling out with him would be a great loss to the Marine. After careful consideration, Sengoku chose to compromise. Caesar was just an unknown clown. It was not worth losing Dushless, a trump card that could change the world situation, for him. Sakasuji is now just a vice admiral, and it seems like he has unlimited potential. He has a high chance of becoming an admiral in the future, but that's a matter of the future. He is strong, but there are many people stronger than him in this world. Even if he becomes an admiral in the future, it's not a big deal. At most, he will have more power to speak. Kiki. This debt, I will pay you back double in the future. Remember this, Sakasuji. After throwing down the threat, Kaiser glared at Sakasuji. Seeing that the situation is not good, Kaiser hurriedly ran to the boat the Marine prepared for him and sped towards the island where he was captured. Before he left, he didn't forget to turn around and make a face at Sakasuji. That look was obviously saying, "Come hit me if you have the guts. Useless trash, the next time I attack you, even if that man protects you, you won't be able to escape death." Sakasuji growled with cold eyes. Chapter 561. The crystal-clear ice sculpture turned into a 10-meter-tall ice wall, but as soon as it got close to Marmarin, Kuzan easily froze it with his Frost Ice Fruits ability, turning it into a towering ice wall that blocked out the sunlight. The entire Marmarin was covered in a cold, dark shadow, and the sun was nowhere to be seen. Perhaps as long as Kazan's, Akiji, was late, Marin would be swallowed up and annihilated by this huge wave, and the people who could survive on the island would be few, and all the ability users would definitely fall. Oh. This is really terrible. They are going to destroy our marine. Is it possible that Whitebeard has personally come to our door? Borsellino, Kizaru, who was wearing a yellow striped suit, widened his eyes and tried his best to hide his calmness. But even so, from his slightly twitching lips, it was clear that Borsellino's heart was abnormally throbbing. When encountering seawater, the one who had the least ability to fight back was the Devil Fruit ability user. Yasukani no Magatama. His tall body turned into a beam of light that shot into the sky. Looking down at this huge ice wall, Borsellino's eyes shone with a cold light. A dazzling light condensed between his hands, covering an area so large that it made one's scalp go numb. Whoosh! After brewing for a while, the flashes that filled the sky finally came down in an instant. The destructive light waves played out a gorgeous scene. The iceberg that was as hard as steel collapsed in an instant. Countless holes appeared, densely packed and disorderly like a beehive. The warm sun shone through these holes. Boom! The towering iceberg gradually collapsed and was annihilated, until finally it turned into ice debris and shattered, and the warm sun once again enveloped the entire Marlindo. The Marines on the entire island took a deep breath of relief. At that moment, they thought that they had stepped into the legendary paradise. The younger generation will replace the older generation, these young people will have a bright future. In the Fleet Admiral's office, Fleet Admiral Sengoku nodded with relief. The current situation of the Marine is quite embarrassing. The admirals, the Marine headquarters' most powerful force in the world, are now in a state of discontinuity. The original Admiral Z has retired, Garp refused to be promoted to an admiral again and again, and the former Admiral Sengoku has been promoted to Fleet Admiral. Now they can only rely on the evil organization Shichibukai, and promise them the legitimacy of their existence while using them to suppress other pirates around the world. By the way, the tsunami just now seems to have nothing to do with Whitebeard. Boom! Garp's slightly doubtful voice hasn't fallen, and the entire Marlindo trembled again. The intensity of the tremors was more frequent than before, and the tremors were more clear. Even Sengoku and Garp's bodies were shaking rhythmically with this frequency. Caw caw caw, Marlindo's ground also had narrow cracks, which was affected by the source of the tremors. It continued to expand and extend, and it showed signs of swallowing the entire island. Boom 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 boom, raising his head, he saw a wave that was even larger than the one before. It was so terrifying that it almost covered the entire sky. The entire world was filled with despair, and there was no sign of life at all. At the very least, in the eyes of Marlin's Marines, what was reflected was pure despair. Is it him? Sengoku's heart was in his throat, and it was extremely difficult for him to breathe. His eyes were gray, and he was 100% sure that if the Marine headquarters was hit, it would definitely be uprooted. Garp's face was also blue, and his iron fist was clenched tightly. He looked at Sengoku, and the two did not hesitate to break out of the window and attack the fierce waves. Renkyaku. His powerful right leg swept forward, and a huge silver ray of light whizzed out. The swift and awe-inspiring ray of light instantly split apart the monstrous waves. The power of the cold ray of light was beyond imagination. It contained some kind of mysterious power, and even the sea didn't dare to easily heal it. Boom! Fleet Admiral Sengoku's golden light shone brightly and turned into a terrible golden Buddha. He condensed a key shield in his palm, and a powerful impact flew out. The boundless waves were torn apart by the two of them, but it was not enough to completely destroy it. They could only keep the Marine headquarters safe and sound. The fierce waves were suppressed by the joint efforts of the two. The tsunami passed by, and the cracks that were torn open were just enough to accommodate Marlin and Mithraea. It's not Whitebeard. Looking at the monstrous waves passing behind him, Garp was cold, and at the same time, he could assert that it was not Whitebeard. A figure had appeared in his eyes. Indeed. Sengoku nodded with an ugly face. Whitebeard had no reason to attack the Marine headquarters. Thinking of the people he had recently offended, only Dustless could do the same. He's deliberately demonstrating, Garp. With a bitter face, Sengoku became a lot older in an instant. The roaring waves directly swallowed the island behind them and completely erased it from the world forever. Sengoku's eyes were filled with regret. His forehead and temples oozed a little cold sweat. Fortunately, Sakazuki did not act rashly. This is not a demonstration, but a warning. If there is a next time, the Marine headquarters will end up in the same way as those sunken islands. Garp said gloomily, his face was gloomy, and the clenched fist in his hand was relaxed. The reason why it was so easy to break the wave attack, there is no doubt that Dustless deliberately let him go. Otherwise, according to his strength, he could use some more shocking abilities to destroy and crush Marlindo. This is just a disguised warning, and it's also a naked slap to Sengoku's old face. It quietly told Fleet Admiral Sengoku a simple and clear meaning: if there is a next time, Marlindo will be erased. Chapter 562. His eyes narrowed, and the light from his eyes was extremely sharp. The feeling of déjà vu is not a lie. His eyes finally fell on the young man in the black coat, and glanced at the pigeon on his shoulder. Dustless's eyes flashed. It turns out to be them. No wonder I felt they were familiar. Wu Chen's face revealed an untraceable arc. He already knew the origin and identity of these people. The secret spy agency of the world government, CP9. However, this group of people was much younger than they were in the future. Dustless didn't recognize them at first glance. Seeing Lucci's strange dress and the pigeon on his shoulder, he suddenly recognized them. Frowning slightly, Dustless didn't remember interacting with these people. While Dustless was looking at the CP9, these young CP9 members also quietly peeked at Dustless, and then looked at the celestial dragons foaming at the mouth, and their faces were moved. They had long heard that Dustless was a different kind of celestial dragons, and today they saw it with their own eyes. Louis South, Saint, let us deal with these celestial dragons. As the leader of the team, Lucci bowed slightly, and then said in a respectful tone. Dustless was silent when he heard the words, and his deep eyes turned around several people, as if he was planning something, and his eyes flashed with a strange luster. Seeing Dustless was silent, Lucci gave Kaku a look. The latter nodded slightly, and then walked toward the celestial dragons lying on the ground, and the disgust in his eyes disappeared. No matter who in the world, they don't have a good impression of celestial dragons, even if they are members of the government. When Kaku was about to drag this group of celestial dragons away, a black shadow suddenly attacked. The speed was as fast as lightning, and the naked eye could only see a fleeting afterimage. Kaku did not hesitate to block with his arms in front of him, and his whole body tensed, and his flesh turned into an invisible armor, extremely hard, resisting the incoming shadow. Bang! The powerful force was beyond imagination, and Kaku was instantly sent flying backward. He retreated a distance of 3 feet before he could stop. His face was pale, and his arms were trembling uncontrollably. Who the hell are you? Staring at Hancock, Kaku suppressed the anger in his heart and asked with an ugly face. The strength of this young woman dressed as a maid was unexpectedly strong. The young master didn't agree to your conditions. Naturally, you can't take this person away. A cold voice came from Hancock's mouth. Hancock said expressionlessly. These CP9 are obviously trying to fish in troubled waters. Dustless remained silent from beginning to end. He neither agreed nor denied. Hancock, who had been with Dustless all the time, knew that Dustless was actually rejecting them. If you dare to attack again, it won't be so simple. Staring at Kaku, Hancock's silky eyes were replaced by coldness, and the warning and contempt in her tone were obvious. The strength of these CP9 is not enough. Rob Lucci and others' faces were gloomy, and their brows were wrinkled, and their fists were uncontrollably clenched. They have already lowered their posture, but they didn't expect Dustless to be so inhumane. Not only did he not give them any face, but he also took the opportunity to slap them in the face. Looking at Dustless's slightly smiling eyes, all the members of the CP9 loosened their fists at the same time. Putting aside the gap between their identities, Dustless's bottomless strength made them unable to compete with him. All of them together, even the little maid named Hancock may not be able to defeat him. And the felony of attacking a celestial dragon is enough for them to go to jail for a lifetime. You know what's good for you. Hancock glanced at the CP9 members, and then she stood back to Dustless. Dustless looked at them with interest, and he nodded secretly. These people are young, but their strength is really good. Perhaps they are not at the peak state like they will be in the future, but they are not far from it. You are the guests of the government, and this trivial matter will be handled by Hancock. His eyes swept over the CP9 members. Dustless smiled, and his eyes finally fell on Lucci, pointing to the fainted Tenryubito below. If you urgently need to recover them, just go out and wait. In the end, Wuchen recovered his usual calm expression. His expression was full of indifference, and his cold tone didn't leave any room for retreat. Then, he closed his eyes and completely ignored these people. The CP9 members suddenly stiffened, and their eyes were faintly burning. Recover. What do you think we are doing? We are the secret spies of the world government, not the waste recovery manager of the garbage station. The corners of their mouths twitched violently, and the CP9 members almost vomited blood. Dustless's eyes were like looking at a mouse, which made them speechless and tangled. Their lungs were burning with fire, but they couldn't vent it. The fire went straight to the brain along the meridians of the body, burning their reason. In the past, when they performed tasks, almost all of them went smoothly, and they crushed the other side with absolute strength, but this task was unexpected. In terms of strength, they can't even beat the other side's maid, and in terms of background, they are even worse. The essence of the existence of the world government is to work for the celestial dragon. Especially Wu Chen's teasing and mocking gaze, it made them feel a few hundred times worse than eating 5 kilograms of flies. They could only lower their heads and not dare to meet Wu Chen's gaze, fearing that they would be violently beaten up by the other party if they were impulsive. In that case, goodbye. The CP9 members once again bowed to Dustless, and then left with a pale face, waiting for Hancock to clean up the celestial dragon, and then they will recover. Even if they are unwilling, they can only do this. Chapter 563. The CP9 group quietly retreated, and the expression of wanting to attack but not daring to break out made Hancock laugh again and again. The world government spy agency directly under Dustless was like a clown in front of him, and they couldn't raise their heads at all. They had no dignity and could only escape. Seeing that the CP9 group completely disappeared, Hancock ran out to find bodyguards to drag the group of Tenryubito out. Although the bodyguards were full of fear, throwing Tenryubito into the garbage dump was not a small crime. Because of Dustless's terrifying power, they still chose to do it. At least the Tenryubito will find trouble in the future. Disobeying Dustless now may result in blood splashing on the spot. In the dark, Dustless's face gradually converged and turned into monotonous ridicule. His deep black eyes were full of wisdom, and he had already guessed why the CP9 suddenly visited. Master, there is something wrong with them. Hancock stood beside Dustless and wondered. She always felt that these people had other plans, but she couldn't tell the specifics. It was not reasonable for them to go back empty-handed. And their hands are too long. CP9 is only an official of the world government, and the object of their specific service seems to be only CP0. Hancock was puzzled. Dustless had told her these things before. Dustless just smiled mysteriously when he heard the words, and his knuckles rhythmically tapped on the table. He was slightly surprised and then nodded gently. He didn't expect Hancock to see the trick. Perhaps because Hancock can be an outsider, she can observe the overall development from an observer's point of view, and then get alternative indirect information. It's very simple, because they want to get valuable things from me, but the CP9 is too arrogant. Even their behind-the-scenes boss can't do it, let alone these small people. Shaking his head contemptuously, Dustless sneered. Ha! The smile on his face suddenly froze. Dustless raised his head and stared at the dark corridor. He suddenly felt a pair of eyes peeking at them from there. As far as the eye could see, there was nothing there. The gloomy space maintained a deathly stillness from beginning to end. There was no change at all. It was as quiet as stagnant water. Was it an illusion? Dustless wondered. His perception rarely made mistakes, and his accuracy had even reached the level of 100%. Damn stupid cow, do you think you can close the gap between us with the devil fruit? Naive and ignorant. Wu Qin sneered inwardly with a sneer on his face. He suddenly remembered a member of the CP9 named Blueno. He is a paramecia door fruit user. His ability is that any object he touches will turn into a door and can be opened. He can open the door through air and then achieve incredible space jumping ability. In short, it could barely be considered a heaven-defying ability. You want to use the ability of the devil fruit to close the gap in strength and use it to spy on intelligence. It's a good idea, but you chose the wrong target. Dustless smiled and was about to kill Blueno on the spot. His eyes flashed, and the majestic chakra gathered in his body instantly disappeared. Such a good chess piece can be used in the opposite way. Dustless, Sama, what is their purpose? Seeing Dustless's strange silence, Hancock asked puzzledly. She can conclude that the purpose of the CP9 is not simple, and there is an unknown conspiracy. That's for sure. Hearing this, Dustless rubbed his throat and deliberately raised his voice, saying, "The purpose of this group of people is very simple. It's estimated that they are here to spy on the design of Pluton. A few idiots want to take the design from me." "Is that so?" Hancock's nose wrinkled slightly, and her clear eyes looked at Dustless suspiciously. In the blink of an eye, Dustless gave her a kind of earth-shaking change, as if he was a different person. "Of course, there is more than one design of Pluton in this world. The original Pluton was designed and built by Water 7, so they should have a backup design in their hands," Wu Chen explained with certainty. His resolute tone was convincing. The original founders of Pluto were the craftsmen of Water 7, so it was understandable that such a confidential design was left behind. "But that's the case." Hancock's eyes flashed as if she just woke up from a dream. "Since Water 7 was the base for the creation of Pluton, it's reasonable to leave behind the design of Pluton." Dustless chatted casually for a while, and the words fell into Blueno's hands word for word. "What kind of joke is this? That's the design of Pluto. How could it be so easy to get the source of the information? I heard from the other 5 that Louis South's strength has already reached the peak of perfection. If it's so easy to get the information, what's the difference between him and those newbies?" In the dark promenade, CP9 member Kaku was the first to question loudly. "Perhaps there is indeed information about Pluton in Water 7, but it's ridiculous that it's so easy to spy on the source of the information. Although Blueno's fruit ability is really amazing, it can't dispel his doubts." A group of CP9 members were hesitant. Although Blueno used this ability to spy on a lot of confidential information, this time his opponent was Dustless, who was feared by the Gorosei, 5 elder stars. They always felt that it was too childish. "Why is it impossible? That man sneered at us before and didn't look at us seriously. People make mistakes and horses stumble. It's normal for me to spy on him when he's full of success." Blueno's face turned red as he saw his teammates looking at him suspiciously. "Let's report to the 5 elders." Lucci, who has been silent from the beginning, said conservatively. He always felt that this is a trap. Even if he knows it's a trap, he must go in. Chapter 564. Early the next morning, the morning wind was mighty and there were no clouds in the sky. Princess Odoheim was ordered by Dustless to return to the Fishman Island early. This was also the result of her pleading. Of course, it was also her last trip to the Fishman Island. In addition, she also had a special task given to her by Dustless. The Fishman Island had long been regarded as a forbidden place by Wu Chen. Whitebeard had unscrupulously occupied the island. How could Wu Chen just watch the duck that was about to reach his mouth disappear without a trace? Especially that old guy had a close relationship with the former pirate king Joel D. Roger. There was a great possibility that he would get the news of the ancient weapon Poseidon from Roger. Whitebeard's ambition has to be guarded against. Although the surface and Nakagami, red hair, are righteous people, it is undeniable that he is a big pirate king as cunning as a rabbit. Roger and Shiki of the 3 legendary pirates have already fallen, and now only Whitebeard is performing. Dustless, Sama, Whitebeard's fleet only has a small number of personnel stationed on the Fishman Island, which does not constitute a substantial threat. The people of the Whitebeard pirates are also quite educated, at least they didn't do such things as robbing. White Zetsu explained, and his words showed admiration for Whitebeard. He is afraid that only the Whitebeard pirates can restrain the inferior pirates to such an obedient level. Hearing that Whitebeard is not on the Fishman Island, Dustless's heart relaxed. At least he doesn't have the idea of the ancient weapon, Poseidon. What about the traces of the CP9 brats yesterday? They should have gone to report to Gorosei, 5 elder stars. Wearing pajamas, sitting leisurely on the sofa, Dustless asked calmly. Brats? Hearing this, White Zetsu was stunned at first, and then understood that Dustless was talking about the CP9. He said, they didn't. They seemed to have gathered to discuss it yesterday, but they didn't say anything after discussing it all night. It is estimated that they went to Gorosei, 5 Elder Stars, or Commander Kong to make a choice. White Zetsu said truthfully, although he didn't know why he cared about a few minions, he still collected information seriously. This kind of thing is beyond the scope of what the CP9 can do. It can only be solved by finding a higher-level person. Commander Kong and Gorosei are the best candidates. That doesn't matter. It's the same no matter who knows about the 5 Honored Stars or Commander Kong. Moreover, if I'm not wrong, the results of their actions should be the same. Dustless smiled calmly. He had already guessed the decision of the 5 Honored Stars. On the avenue of Mariehua, all the members of the CP9 looked very unnatural. It's not that they suspected Blueno. They trained together when they were children and they were already honest with each other. They would never be bored enough to suspect that he was a traitor. Even if Bruno's explanation was reasonable, in their eyes, it was extremely far-fetched. Even if some people were really careless, what they said casually was not something they could pry into. Since you doubt me, let the 5 great elders decide. Bruno was too lazy to waste his breath and simply kicked the ball to the 5 great elders. Lucci saw all this, and his heart burned with a blazing flame. He was particularly irritated. He always felt that this was a trap, and even if he knew, he had to fall into it. Even if it's really out of thin air, no one can resist the temptation of the ancient weapon, Pluton blueprint. When they first heard that Pluton's blueprint was in Water 7, they fell into a trap. That kid must have done this on purpose. In the spacious and bright hall, the highest power of the world government, Gorosei, 5 great elders, lived here. This is also the place where they usually discuss and work. The Gorosei, 5 great elders, who had bronze skin and blonde hair, had a cold look in his eyes. He was sure that Dustless did this. He let Blueno hear the news about Pluton's blueprint on purpose. The purpose was to attract their attention. Indeed, he designed a trap that we had to fall into. The bald Kuang Lao Xing who was holding the saber frowned and said. There was an evil and cruel aura between his eyebrows. They had always been in the upper hand in the past several fights with Wu Qin. They hadn't expected that the counterattack would be so fierce this time. They were caught off guard. Even if it's nonsense, they must send undercover agents to check it out. Rumors come from nowhere. Water 7 was responsible for the construction of Pluto, so it's normal for other blueprints to exist. The Gorosei, 5 great elders, said with a face full of wisdom. He was the tallest among the 5, so he immediately attracted the attention of the other 4. The other 4 Gorosei, 5 great elders, nodded in agreement. It's not impossible to keep a copy of Pluton's blueprint just in case. Anyway, this isn't a trap. We're definitely going to fall into it. With a sigh, the Gorosei, 5 great elders, said helplessly. They used to be the dominant force, but now they're suddenly pulled down. With the help of the Pluton's blueprint incident, that kid painstakingly led our attention to Water 7. It's definitely not a good thing. He must be secretly planning some unknown conspiracy. The Gorosei, 5 great elders, said gloomily. It's not that they haven't schemed against Dustless before, but every time they were easily broken by him, and they were slapped in the face. Hearing this, the other 5 Elder Stars all had gloomy faces, including the 5 Elder Stars with long hair and beard who had been talking loudly before. In the past, they had also fought with each other. They were the ones who played dirty, but in the end, they were the ones who were played dirty. Now that Dustless took the initiative to make a move, they really didn't have much confidence in winning. It doesn't matter, we will send a few CP9 members to Water 7 as spies. They were the ones who discovered Pluton's blueprint, so it doesn't matter if they are spies. Even if they all die in the end, they are just small pawns, it's not a big deal. The Gorisei, 5 great elders, with a scar on his forehead said coldly. Everyone knows this simple truth. Chapter 565. 3 days later, in the system world. In the pavilion, Dustless's expression was different from before. There was a rare look of anxiety and impatience on his face, and his calm eyes also splashed out ripples and waves. His heart also became restless. I couldn't tell that you would actually lose your composure over this kind of thing. The ethereal celestial voice spread, and the system consciousness Ling looked at Dustless in surprise. Dustless gave people the feeling that he was an emotionless robot. Just like today, he showed an anxious expression from time to time, who knows how many times in his life. Could it be that you think I'm a stone with a heart of stone? I'm also a person of flesh and blood. Dustless stared at Ling in annoyance and said impatiently. Around dawn, System Ling told Dustless that Huey G's due date had arrived. Since then, his heart had not been at ease, and it was in his throat, like the waves of the sea, sometimes high and sometimes low. His Tao heart that was as immovable as a rock also began to loosen. Humans were not plants and could not be emotionless. Although Dustless's temperament was unusually cold, he was not a stubborn stone that did not understand the affairs of the world. He always maintained concern for his own people, but he, who was not good with words, had always hidden this sincere feeling in his heart, and only silently guarded it. There was no need to make it known to everyone. There was a saying that everything was interconnected, and some things did not need to be explained at all. On the contrary, sometimes things would go in the opposite direction when they reached an extreme, and the more one explained, the darker it would become. Everything was fine as long as one let nature take its course. System Ling looked at Dustless with a smile, with an understanding attitude. As a father for the first time, it was normal for him to feel a little nervous. After all, this was also the first time Dustless experienced this. Anyway, I rarely see such an anxious expression on your face. In my impression, this is the first time I've seen you. A light voice with loneliness and sadness came from behind, like a supreme celestial voice, soothing one's heart. However, at this moment, Dustless was unable to be happy. His face stiffened with a hint of guilt. Looking back, he saw Otsutsuki Hiroo, whom he hadn't seen for a while. At this moment, she looked a little sad. Her face was as pale as the snow in the winter. Her face was full of loneliness. She clenched her silver teeth, and the corners of her mouth were extremely bitter. There were even some obvious cracks. I'm really sorry. The corners of Dustless's mouth wriggled. His heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife, and he was speechless and extremely guilty. He had spent the most time with Yuluo. The latter had always wanted to have a child, but to this day, she still couldn't fulfill her wish. Instead, it was Huey who came later who got there first. I don't want you to. Glancing at Dustless in disappointment, Yuluo's eyes were dim and lifeless. Her silvery hair had also become much whiter. Her entire body was emitting an extremely powerless feeling of hesitation and loss. Her heavenly beauty gave others the feeling that she had become much older in an instant. Seeing this, Dustless's heart clenched, and he was just about to persuade her when the clear and melodious cry of a child resounded. Woo! Dustless was stunned. Looking at Kagaya's delivery room, his body turned into a gust of wind and rushed forward. Breaking the door and entering, a stunning woman with golden hair was reflected in Dustless's eyes. She was dressed quite casually, with light makeup and no makeup, and her skin was as white as snow. She didn't need to be deliberately dressed up. Her whole person was natural and unrestrained, giving people a very magnanimous and natural feeling. Looking around, it was Tsunade with golden hair. As a medical ninja, she knew much more than Dustless, and the task of delivering the baby inevitably fell on her. At this moment, Tsunade was holding a little doll carved out of jade in her hand. Its black eyes were moving nimbly, and its delicate skin was as white as snow. It was no different from Kaguya, and there were two cute horns on its head. Staring blankly at the tender child in Tsunade's arms, Dustlas spontaneously felt a sense of blood connection, and an inexplicable special force connected him and the baby in swaddling clothes. Yeah. It seemed that it also felt a sense of intimacy with Dustlas, and the tender baby waved at Dustlas with its fangs and claws. Its dark eyes were sparkling with tears, and it was anxious to get out of Tsunade's arms. It looked like it was about to cry, and it evoked the sympathy and pity that had disappeared for countless years in Dustlas's heart. Heartless little brat, wasting so much of my energy. You forgot about the midwife when you saw your father. Tsunade rolled her eyes and angrily handed the baby in her arms to Dustlas. She put her hands on her hips and shouted, "This heartless little girl is as heartless as you. No wonder you are father and daughter. You don't know how to express your gratitude to me. After all, I was the one who delivered the baby. Even if there is no credit, there should be hard work." Tsunade complained with dissatisfaction. This little girl was too much. She cried and made a fuss in her arms, but when she was in Dustlas's hands, she immediately smiled. Seeing that Dustlas and the baby in his arms were so close, Tsunade's calm eyes were filled with jealousy. Then she walked to Dustlas's side, and her slender fingers gently pinched the little girl's little face and teased. "Is it a girl?" Remembering what Tsunade said before, he subconsciously looked down at the lower body. Sure enough, as Tsunade said, the future will definitely be a beautiful young lady. Quietly looking at the little girl's dark pupils, Dustlas was confused. He felt that this day came unexpectedly, and he didn't even do the most basic preparation. When he was daydreaming, he suddenly felt a wet face, and his empty thoughts suddenly came back to him. Paji. In the twinkling of an eye, Wu Chen's face was left with the little girl's mouth mark, which was full of water stains. Wu Chen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In his life, it was the first time that his face was attacked by others. This little girl is very clever. Tsunade's eyes widened, and her watery eyes looked at the little girl in surprise. For a moment, she caught a cunning look that didn't belong to her age from those black eyes. "Nonsense, don't you know whose flesh and blood you are?" Hearing this, Dustlas's face was full of pride, and his high tone was filled with endless pride. This little girl can be seen from her eyes that she is a clever little girl. It's my fault that my genes are too strong, and so is my daughter. Chapter 566. Looking at the radiant and spirited Dustlas, Tsunade was also filled with emotion for a while. After Dustlas's former enemies saw his expression, they would probably crawl out of hell unwillingly. In his impression, Dustlas was just a villain who did not commit any of the 10 evils. "Bring it over for me to see." A weak and light voice spread out and entered the ears of Dustlas and Tsunade. Turning their heads, the owner of this weak voice was Kaguya, who was sweating all over. At this moment, her face was pale, revealing a sense of helplessness from her soul. The birth of Smarty had almost exhausted all the effort she had accumulated in her life. Compared to Dustlas, who only worried but didn't put in any effort, Huey had sacrificed too much. Yeah, little Smarty's clear eyes looked at Huey G and blinked. From Huey G's kind eyes, she caught a glimpse of love and gentleness. The immature but powerful body twisted again, and he raised his thin arms and threw himself into Kaguya's arms. Obviously, he was tired of Dustlas. Poochie. Tsunade couldn't help laughing when she saw this scene. Her delicate face bloomed with a beautiful smile, and her bell-like laughter was pleasant to listen to. She teased Dustlas with interest. "You forgot your father when you had your mother. It seems that you are just like that." It is the nature of babies to look for their mother's care. Handing the child in his hand to Kaguya, Dustless did not deny Tsunade's words. It was indeed as she said. It's been hard on you. Staring at Kaguya with complex gratitude, Dustless's tone was as heavy as Mount Tai, and his bright eyes looked at Kaguya. His words were completely from the bottom of his heart, and there was no hypocrisy. It's okay, you can recover after a while. Taking the immature baby in Dustless's hand, Kaguya nodded slightly with a sweet smile on her face. She can naturally feel Dustless's sincerity. A sincere greeting was far more useful than thousands of hypocritical sweet words. Speaking of which, what's this little girl's name? Her eyes fell on Dustless's body. Tsunade frowned and asked. The little clever boy came and went for a short time, but after a long time, it sounded very harsh. Isn't that obvious? Dustless rolled his eyes at Tsunade and said bluntly, children follow their father's surname. This is a principle that has never changed since ancient times. Of course, it's called Uchiha. Suddenly, two cold eyes locked on him. Wu Chen's words came to an abrupt end. One of them was Kaguya, and the other was Otsutsuki Haruo, who was rushing over. It's really strange. These two women's tempers have always been at odds. It's rare for them to have the same opinion today. Dustless thought helplessly in his heart. At the same time, he couldn't help but feel extremely conflicted. He had already guessed that the naming process, which should have been smooth, was the most difficult process. I think the surname should be Otsutsuki. The Uchiha surname is indeed glorious, but it's already a thing of the past. Now, everything has changed, and I'm in a foreign country. All in all, there's no need to respect those ridiculous truths. Glancing at Dustless, Haruo said her intention, and the determination in her eyes was unshakable. What you said is true. Kaguya nodded towards Dustless to express her point of view. From the beginning to the end, Kaguya has maintained a contemptuous attitude towards Uchiha. It's just a branch of Otsutsuki, and as Haruo said before, there is no need to adhere to the rules in a foreign country. Yeah. Seeing that she was ignored, the little girl's inarticulate voice sounded. She seemed to hear the conversation between several people and quite agreed with Haruo's statement. Seeing this, Dustless's forehead was full of black lines. Dustless can't change the principles summarized by the ancient sages at will, and the idea of children following their father's surname has been deeply ingrained. It's impossible to change Dustless easily. Ahem, clearing his throat, Dustless chuckled and said, it doesn't matter. I am a very democratic person. What the surname is, it will be decided by her in the future. Pointing to the baby in Kaguya's arms, Dustless said. If you are democratic, you should vote. Looking at Dustless with disdain, Tsunade said contemptuously. She knew that Dustless deliberately played Taiji Fist to fool her. In the future, as long as she is tempted a little, this little girl may change sides and jump into Dustless's arms. Children are always naive. Up to you. Huey clearly didn't want to dwell on such a question. She just focused on teasing the red-faced smarty, occasionally letting out crisp laughter. Everyone, including Dustless and Uluotsune, looked at the scene in front of them harmoniously. When the cold Kaguya revealed this kind face, it was no less than the sun rising from the south. She will be called Yushi from now on. After a moment of silence, Wu Chen gave him a name. It was not appropriate to call him that. Even if he didn't have a surname, he needed a name. Otsutsuki Suki or Uchiha Suki, sounds good, but is there any special meaning? Yuluo nodded in satisfaction after trying to read it 2 or 3 times. Then, he turned to Dustless and asked expectantly. This name was indeed not bad and sounded quite elegant. Huiji also hummed the new name of Little Smarty. After a while, she revealed a knowing smile. It seemed that she was quite satisfied with the name Dustless gave her. However, the baby in her arms puffed up her cheeks and bared her fangs at Dustless. She seemed to be extremely dissatisfied, but her protest was ignored by everyone. Meaning? Is this necessary? Just say it smoothly. Dustless was speechless by Yuluo's question, and he went straight to the point. After the words fell, even Kagaya stared at Dustless with dissatisfaction. The name has been the most important thing since ancient times. She didn't expect Dustless to be so perfunctory. Dustless felt as if he had been shot even though he was lying down. Only then did he suddenly remember that compared to him, a surpasser from the third dimension, people like Kagaya were still considered old antiques. It was indeed difficult for him to accept the idea of transcending dimensions. Chapter 567. There was an insurmountable gap between the thinking of modern people and ancient people. It was impossible for them to accept Dustless's thinking ability in a short period of time. After hundreds and thousands of years of changes, the generation gap was not something that could be ignored. Fortunately, after a while of talking, Kagaya and the others reluctantly accepted Dustless's proposed name, just as Dustless explained before. The name was not important, the most important thing was to communicate with each other. The key was the meaning. Although the explanation was extremely far-fetched, after some coaxing and pestering, the girls nodded in agreement. Dustless originally wanted to let Kagaya and her daughter see the outside world. Being trapped in the system space for a long time was not a long-term solution, but Kagaya unexpectedly refused. The reason was quite simple. With the addition of the little life form Yushi, Huey's boring life was no longer monotonous. Compared to before, it was much more colorful and interesting. Her ambition that could swallow the heavens and devour the earth slowly faded. Forget it, looking at the mother and daughter entangled in harmony with each other, Dustless also stopped the plan to take little Yueshi out. This was too cruel and unfair to Kagaya, and Dustless did not have the skills to take care of children. It was enough to let her live quietly and peacefully. You are too easily satisfied. Also, my dream is still a bubble. Seeing Dustless's complacent expression, Yuluo was quite dissatisfied. She did not hide the blame in her tone. The plan in her mind to give birth to a nest of children had not been realized yet. Just go with the flow. You also know that this kind of thing depends on fate. In short, you can't blame me. Dustless shrugged, with an expression that had nothing to do with him. Yuluo's mouth twitched, and gloomily stared at Dustless. No one was an idiot. Dustless's words implied that there was a problem with her body. She wanted to refute, but there was no way to refute. Dustless and Kagaya hit the mark, and countless times with her, there was no movement at all. This had already quietly explained everything. This is an illness. It has to be treated. Dustless gently patted Yuluo's shoulder and said with a smile. The ridicule in his tone was not concealed at all. Following which, his body dissipated without any warning like a breeze, forever disappearing from this world. In an instant, he disappeared without a trace, and his aura was completely gone. Warm sunlight poured down from the 9 heavens. The whole world was bathed in the scorching sun. It was full of vitality and vitality. It made people temporarily forget that this was an extremely distorted world. Coincidentally, some people were not used to this warm sun. The Akagami, red hair, pirates, who had escaped from death, were desolate and bleak. The momentum that swept the sea in the past was gone with the wind. The battleships docked at the coast were almost destroyed. Looking at it, it was full of traces of the waves. In the past, the Akagami, red hair, pirates were domineering, traversing the 4 seas, sweeping the new world, and stepping on the top of the Yonko, 4 emperors. Now, only a few of them were left. It was exactly the same as the saying, when one reaches the pinnacle of prosperity, one will inevitably decline. It was all because of that man's single thought that brought disaster to his name. Years of dreams, painstaking efforts, all turned into nothing in an instant. He was even reduced to a state where he was about to be erased. New world. I will definitely come back again. The powerful oath resounded through the sky. Akagami, red hair. Shanks then left with the remaining crew members, and the lonely shadow gradually lengthened and disappeared on the sea. Dustless, the originator of the Akagami, red hair, pirates, was extremely proud. People were in high spirits when they were happy, and sometimes he would show a knowing smile. This made Hancock think that the sun had emerged from the bottom of the sea. On the balcony, Dustless was lying on the couch. The birth of Little Moon she really made him in a good mood, and his mouth was humming a song involuntarily. He didn't even notice the sudden appearance of a figure. This time there may be a chance. Doflamingo's eyes squinted and he peeped at Dustless's expression without a trace. There was a smile on his face, and he was still a wanted pirate. Although the position of Shichibukai was still a step away, it was only a short distance away. Dustless didn't help him add fuel to the fire, and it would be difficult for him to get to the top. In the near future, I will help you get the position of Shichibukai as soon as possible. We must seize the throne of King Dressrosa as soon as possible and drag the original Liku royal family down from the altar. Before Doflamingo could speak, Dustless spoke first, and his cold voice was filled with killing intent. It's true that we should speed up the pace. Caesar seems to have been caught by Sakazuki, but in the end, thanks to your help, the old boy would have to go to prison again. Doflamingo smiled flatteringly, and his tone was full of flattery, and he had completely given up the so-called dignity. It's not too late to pick up his dignity when his wings grow hard in the future. Now he's just a stray dog. The identity of the celestial dragons doesn't have much of a deterrent effect on the Gorosei, 5 elder stars. What's more, their Don Quixote family has no power of the celestial dragons. If they lose the protection of Dustless, they will die. It's not just him, Caesar is the same, so Doflamingo is unusually obedient. Glancing at Doflamingo faintly, Dustless didn't say anything. It was the opposite of the way he met Hancock before. In the face of these subordinates who are not subordinates, the necessary oppression is still necessary. The reason why he chose to let Doflamingo sit on the Shichibukai in advance is entirely because Caesar's trace is exposed. The construction of Pluton must have a quiet environment. Only after Doflamingo sits on the Shichibukai, he can also seek the king's position of Dressrosa to shelter Caesar. What are the specific steps? Lowering his posture, Doflamingo asked in a low voice. It's very simple. Lead your pirate group to destroy everything. The loss is enough to make the Marines unable to bear it. At that time, they will naturally come to you to compromise. It doesn't matter if it's big. Behind me is your foothold. The simplest and most effective way is to be rude and direct. This is the truth that will never change. Chapter 568. Getting the promise he dreamed of, Doflamingo left Mariewa with a wild laugh, and the unscrupulous laughter seemed to mock the helpless and angry look of the Navy after being attacked by him. In the dark, Doflamingo has seen the old face of Fleet Admiral Sengoku. On the balcony, Dustless glanced indifferently at the battleships sailing away, and he could even see that Doflamingo was standing on the deck. Master, aren't you spoiling him too much? Hancock, dressed in a maid's uniform, came quietly and gently massaged Dustless's shoulders on both sides, and the technique was extremely accurate. Doflamingo is ambitious, like a wolf or a tiger, and it is common for dogs to bite their masters in the end. Dustless closed his eyes comfortably and enjoyed it comfortably. After a while, Hancock's massage skills improved by leaps and bounds, and the fatigue on both sides of his shoulders was swept away. Don't worry, it's just a small pawn. Hearing this, Dustless replied casually, and his indifferent tone obviously never put Doflamingo in his heart. No matter how beautiful the Monkey King's conspiracy is, even if it is flawless, under the shroud of the Five-Finger Mountain, he is always insignificant, just a tiny particle among hundreds of millions of floating particles. The consequence of a mere Tawu wanting to shake the world was like a moth flying into a flame, seeking its own destruction. If he could be tactful, Dustless didn't mind continuing to raise Doflamingo. If he dared to resist, within a breath, Doflamingo's blood would splatter 3 feet, and his head would be taken. So there is no need to worry about it, just use it with contempt. What's more, that kid has been suppressed by me for so long, and the hidden wildness in his heart and the anger that has been accumulated for a long time in the past few days has released extraordinary destructive power. A mad dog that goes crazy. Sengoku will be troubled. Taking the crystal glass handed by Hancock, shaking the red liquid in it, Dustless then drank it, and the red residue left on the corner of his mouth combined with his gloomy face was particularly strange. He was the complete opposite of the sunny Dustless from before. Now, he was like a demon in human skin. Dustless was able to put himself in the shoes of those who were truly loyal to him and treat them calmly. As for insignificant characters like Doflamingo, it was fine to throw him away when he had no value. Doflamingo was only temporarily attached to Dustless. In the future, when his wings were fully grown, he would leave him. When this chess piece no longer had any value, it would not be too late to kill him. After losing the restraint of Dustless, Doflamingo, the ferocious tiger beast, finally revealed its sharp fangs and devoured one Navy battleship after another. The bloody storm set off by Don Quixote swept across the world, and the entire Marine headquarters was covered with an unprecedented dark cloud. Bastard, Doflamingo, this beast, one day I will tear him to pieces to vent the hatred in my heart. The angry Sengoku tore the information in his hand, his eyes were bloody red, and his whole body was releasing a huge oppressive aura, and the whole office was shaking. Bah! After swallowing confidential documents, the goat whined twice and fainted. Doflamingo was a celestial dragon. Even though the Don Quixote clan had given up the privilege of being a celestial dragon, Doflamingo was still a celestial dragon from the beginning to the end. This identity alone was enough to render them helpless, not to mention the mastermind behind him. This damn ant was obviously extremely fragile, but he always jumped around and ignored the Marine, and even smacked the Marine's face. Sengoku's feelings were self-evident. This was the feeling of having to suffer in silence, unable to voice out the bitterness. Humph. Boom. Caca. Staring coldly at the proud and arrogant Doflamingo in the newspaper, Sengoku saw Doflamingo laughing at the Marine. He didn't even think about it. He condensed the original transparent air shield in his hand and directly shattered it, turning it into goose feather-like fluttering snow. Bang bang bang, the dull sound of knocking on the door made Sengoku frown. When did the Marine become so unruly? When he was about to verbally reprimand, a tall figure directly broke the door. That guy Z left Marin on a battleship. Without waiting for Sengoku to ask, Garp, who was wearing a dog head hat, said. Hearing this, Sengoku frowned deeply, and his voice was hoarse, and he said seriously, his students were slaughtered by that bastard Doflamingo yesterday. Maybe he went to find trouble with Doflamingo. Yesterday, the Marine's ship unfortunately encountered Doflamingo, and almost all of them were killed, and only a few escaped. With such deep hatred, how can Z swallow his anger? A few years ago, Z's wife and son were brutally killed by pirates. At that time, he hated pirates, and now the new hatred plus the old hatred aroused the flame in Z's heart. The destination of that guy's voyage is not the sea where Doflamingo is located. Garp shook his head. Sengoku suddenly looked at Garp with his pupils enlarged, and his old eyes were filled with awe-inspiring luster. A bad idea swept through his mind, and his fists were as big as a bucket. Looking at Sengoku's eyes, Garp nodded and said in a heavy tone, Z is likely to take the students who survived to Mariewa to question the man. Z knows that temporarily repelling Doflamingo won't solve the root of the problem. Only by completely stopping Royce South can he stop Doflamingo's plot against the Marine. But Z is a very intelligent and sensitive man. He shouldn't fight with him. So there is no need to worry. Garp said with uncertainty. He also had doubts about what he said, but he just hoped so. Sengoku smiled bitterly and regretted for a while. If he had given the position of 7 Warlords of the Sea to Doflamingo, there would not be such a situation. Chapter 569. Early in the morning 3 days later, the bloody storm set off by Doflamingo still continued. The fierce name of Heaven's Yaksha spread throughout the New World. Even small places like the Four Seas could hear his nickname. Countless Navy battleships were destroyed by him, and countless Navy soldiers were killed by him. Not only that, Doflamingo's claws also reached out to ordinary civilians. The Marine could only swallow their anger, not to mention these weak civilians. Therefore, the number of islands and towns destroyed by Doflamingo was more than the number of hands. Fleet Admiral Sengoku, who couldn't bear it, finally gave the title of Shichibukai to Doflamingo. Although he couldn't wait to tear him into pieces, he didn't dare to kill him. The name of Tenryubito was too terrible. The law did not allow the Marine to kill Tenryubito. Afterward, Doflamingo also became Shichibukai. On the Blue Sea, Marine battleships moved forward rapidly. The sea rippled and expanded to swallow the surrounding sea. Damn Doflamingo! Z's heavy roar sounded in the cabin. His hand slightly smashed the table in front of him. It was as easy as blowing air. Only in this way could he vent the burning flames in his heart. This is the so-called Marine. What kind of justice is this? Or is the definition of justice the winner is king and the loser is a bandit? Is this the justice I pursue? Z's eyes were dim. For the first time in his life, he doubted his faith. Marine headquarters held the loud slogan of absolute justice all day long. But their inner nature was no different from those pirates. They were afraid of the strong bullying the weak. The strong preyed on the weak and the strong was respected. When the law of the jungle forced the word justice, the surface did not change but the inside was rotten. His beloved student was slaughtered by pirates. As the embodiment of justice, the Marine couldn't crusade against evil. Not only that, but now from the Marine's predicament, to a large extent, they will collude with the so-called Shichibukai in the future. This is not the righteous Marine that Z pursued. It is contrary to his beliefs. In the past, he was confident that the Marine has fallen into hell. Teacher. A haggard and weak voice came from outside the cabin. Z raised his head and pushed open the cabin door. A group of exhausted students were reflected in his eyes. His old eyes swept across the students one by one. Z lowered his head, his face full of guilt. In the end, I also chose to give in. I am not qualified to criticize Sengoku. Z said with a forced smile. Doflamingo acted recklessly, slaughtering the Marine Corps like slaughtering dogs. Countless soldiers were wailing and trembling under his hands. Z didn't stand up to arrest Doflamingo, just like when his chess piece was killed, he chose to remain silent. Why did he choose to remain silent? There was no other reason. Doflamingo was a celestial dragon, and behind him was Lois South, a behemoth that could cover the sky with one hand. Z's thoughts of revenge were extinguished, and he continued to remain silent. Because they are celestial dragons. In this world, celestial dragons are synonymous with justice. The laws of the world are all made by them. Justice is judged by them. So is life and death. Those who resist their rule are the enemies of justice. In other words, the enemies of celestial dragons are the embodiment of evil. Z, who believes that justice will prevail, will certainly not resist celestial dragons. In today's world, celestial dragons have become a manifestation of justice. Only by respecting celestial dragons is justice. Resistance is evil. Such a ridiculous truth has deceived the world for more than 800 years, but no one can jump out of the nightmare created by justice. Until now, Z felt like it was a lifetime ago. He suddenly woke up. The justice that I seek is sacred, not this kind of twisted justice that has been rewritten by others. Staring at the looming Mariehua and the clouds in the distance, Z's loud roar contained the firmness of a rock. The ruthlessness of celestial dragons is well known to the world. They are evil butchers dressed in the cloak of justice. They themselves are the dirtiest existence. The Marine is also an accomplice to evil. Z, who was a Marine admiral in the past, is no exception. Therefore, Z has an amazing conclusion. The most evil existence in the world is not pirates, nor is it the Yonko for emperors, but the forces led by celestial dragons. They are the most evil existence in the world. In the name of hypocritical justice, their shadows cover the sky and the sun. The scope of slavery is more than an island and a small piece of the sea. The location of radiation is the whole world. Today, Z realized that compared to those pirates who chased their dreams, he who was loyal to the world government and loyal to celestial dragons in the past was more evil. In the early morning, Mariehua was filled with countless mist, looming in the clouds and mist, connecting the sky and the earth. It was beautiful. Mariehua is not only the headquarters of the world government, but also the gathering place of celestial dragons. It covers a large area and is difficult to estimate. Looking as far as the eye can see, Mariehua standing on the red line is spectacular. Looking at the world today, it is unique, and its momentum is unique. The Marine battleship actually took the initiative to come to Mariehua. It's rare. His sharp eyes penetrated the heavy fog, and the galloping Marine battleship appeared in Dustless's eyes. After a glance, Dustless withdrew his gaze. He was very busy these days. Most of the time was spent in the world of the system. Accompanying Kagaya all day and playing with little Ueshi was boring, but it was also a good way to spend a long time. Just as he was about to get into the system world, the sound of the Den Den Mushi in his arms came into Dustless's ears. He frowned slightly and then took out the black Den Den Mushi. This is... Z, what is he looking for me for, or is it for Doflamingo? The doubts in his eyes turned into speculation. Dustless learned that Doflamingo recently killed many of Z's students. Chapter 570. Time slipped away unknowingly, and in the blink of an eye, 5 hours passed quietly. In the spacious and bright room, Dustless looked doubtful, and his deep black eyes restored indifference. He was sure that Z's visit was not a good thing. The weasel paying a visit to the chicken is not a good thing. Doflamingo's recent lawlessness, Dustless also heard a little about it. But in his view, it was just a small fuss. The effect was negligible. Unexpectedly, Sengoku chose to compromise and agreed to Doflamingo's conditions and promised him the position of Shichibukai. I'm afraid that old guy is also tormented to the point that he can't stand it anymore. Dustless had some admiration for this clown Doflamingo. Doflamingo ambushed the Marines, most of them were young and had good qualifications. Once these people grow up in the future, their room for improvement is infinite. Even one or two of them can become the mainstay of the Marines, turning into fertile soil to protect the towering tree of the Marines. However, Doflamingo had cut him in half at the waist and killed him mercilessly. More than 90% of the freshmen were taught by Z, and they get along with each other day and night. Their feelings must have reached a very deep level, and even reached a deep level of father and son. So that's how it is. You know it's useless to deal with Doflamingo, so you came to me. giving up what's close at hand to seek what's far away. Wu Chen's gentle expression was full of contempt. He instantly understood Zi's intention, but do you think it's useful to find me? Relying on your strength, you want me to yield. That's a fantasy, Zi. Frankly speaking, Dustless quite sympathized with him. He worked hard for the Marines all his life, and when his life was about to wither, it was his student Borsellino, Kizaru, who personally sent him to his death. The rise and fall of the Marines are caused by the Marines, and they are destroyed by the Marines. His feelings are pitiful, his actions are excusable, but his crime is punishable. Dustless sneered. A tall and broad figure walked in. He had purple hair and wore glasses. If one ignored the cold glint in his eyes, he was dressed quite elegantly. The two of them looked at each other. Because of sitting on the stairs, Dustless was taller than Zi. Dustless was looking down at him. First of all, Zi's aura was already at a disadvantage, which made him quite uncomfortable. I still remember that you are the honorary admiral of the Marine, so why did you choose to be the enemy of justice? Clenching his fists, countless blue veins were vaguely visible on his arms. Zi coldly questioned, what Doflamingo did was the result of your indulgence and indifference. At the end of his speech, Zi's eyes were emitting cold air. Towards Doflamingo, Zi couldn't wait to tear him into pieces. Unless he directly killed him, he wouldn't be able to solve the problem. You came all the way here. Sit down and soothe your throat first. Pointing to the left side of the sofa, Dustless signaled Zi to sit there. As for the cold questioning tone, he ignored it and quietly tasted the fragrant tea in his hand. As if nothing happened, Dustless was unusually quiet. This kind of indifference made Zi's resentment towards Dustless soar. Justice. Zi, you are not young anymore. All day long you still talk about justice. Sometimes I really feel like you are a child who hasn't grown up. Looking at Zi, Wu Chen sneered and didn't hide his sarcasm. I think you are a child who hasn't grown up. You don't understand the essence of justice. Zi's old face tightened, he didn't hesitate to show weakness. Then tell me your understanding of justice. I'm all ears. The corners of his mouth curled up with a hint of ridicule. That pair of deep eyes flashed with ridicule, as if he was sizing up a clown, looking down at Zi from above. Their identities were suddenly reversed. Dustless was more like a deep audience, quietly waiting for the clown's performance on the stage. What kind of attitude is this? Zi's tone raised a few decibels as he said in an even more oppressive tone. Dustless's indifference and even contempt had touched Zi's bottom line. His student was killed. Dustless not only didn't show any sign of remorse, this cold and perfunctory attitude made Zi feel contempt. This is my attitude towards the justice you speak of. It doesn't matter who is right or wrong, because the final say is not in their hands. Lightly glancing at Zi, Dustless said without any emotion. What is justice? When you ignore this inherent definition, you will find that the one who can judge evil and justice is actually the one with the biggest fist. Justice. The winner is the justice. It's so simple. For example, Dustless's mouth raised a cold arc. His body disappeared in an instant and disappeared into the darkness. His speed has reached the realm of perfection, escaping the perception of Zi's observation hockey. This guy is using some kind of ability to move, not relying on the speed of his body. Zi's body stiffened. Now my fist is bigger than yours, so I can judge that you are an evil person. If I say you are guilty, then you are guilty. A demonic whisper entered Zi's ears, followed by a flash of golden light. Armament hockey hardening. With a low shout, the surface of his body was replaced by a dark color. Zi had long predicted that Dustless would take the opportunity to use armament hockey. Clang! An ear-piercing boom spread throughout the entire room, and an invisible ripple spread out, causing everyone to feel dizzy. All the decorations in the room instantly exploded. Caw caw caw. Under the impact of the brute force, the geographical position of the entire room was dislocated. Despicable. Knowing that Dustless is an ability user, Z's right arm was also covered with armament hockey. His fist was enough to smash a giant building, and he mercilessly punched his head. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.